Laurel, Trisha. Yeah, I think we have a quorum, so let's get started. Sound good? Where's my printed one? Okay. So I'm calling the meeting to order. Let's do the roll call of members to establish a quorum. I'll call on everybody, starting at the bottom. Trisha?
Trisha Ateertua here.
Laurel?
Here.
Laura?
Laura Swanson here.
Chelsea?
Chelsea Parker here.
Heather?
Heather Bonilla here.
And Monica McDaniel here. Great, thank you. Is there anybody who'd like to read the invocation this evening? Okay, I'll do it. This is our school. May peace dwell here. May the rooms be full of contentment. May love abide here. Love of one another, love of our school, and love of life itself. Let us remember that as many hands build a house, so many hearts build a school. Are there any agenda modifications? Seeing, hearing none.
We do have one, don't we, Alex?
Yes, thank you for reminding me. Under the consent agenda is listed 2.3, accept employee resignations, and the one under that is Emily Novikov, and she is not actually leaving us. So there was some confusion there. So I would like to remove that item if possible.
Duly noted. Removal of item 2.3 from the consent agenda. Any other modifications called for? No other modifications? Okay, great. So with that all done, is there any audience to address the council? And I'm, let's see, I can go to participants and look for hands raised. I don't see any hands raised in the participants. Heather, I see a Heather Warner. You have 3 minutes, dear.
Okay, I'll be quick. I just wanted the council to consider that given this week's COVID numbers that were backlogged and then reported today, today they released 662 new cases over Friday through Monday. And I just wanted the council and school to maybe consider starting winter break early, just to help give families and teachers adequate time to possibly quarantine before Christmas, since we're about 10 days or so away from that. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other audience to address the council? Thank you for bringing that up, Heather. Yeah, we got that information during a staff meeting I was in today, and it's freaky.
Monica,
Yeah.
I have somebody who was wanting to speak during this time, but she said she was in the waiting room. Alex, can you check that? And if not, I can just check in with her to see what's going on.
Thanks, Chelsea.
I don't believe there is a waiting room on this meeting.
Okay, then maybe she went to the wrong one. Let me just check with her real fast if you guys don't mind.
Sure, I won't move on.
I think she went to the finance committee link instead of this link.
Oh, gotcha.
Okay, she just was able to join. Hi, Carrie.
Hi.
Hi, Carrie. I understand you want to address the council.
Yes, I do.
Okay, great. You have 3 minutes to do so, please.
Yes.
Great.
On Sunday evening, I was absolutely triggered because at dinner time, I received a message that said that we needed to prepare for rainy day snacks and breaks outside. And it listed a list of clothing to have for our children. And I was triggered for a few reasons. One, because I'm a parent in Miss Welsh's sixth grade class, and they don't have any seating. There's no table. They're not allowed to be near the door, which has the awning. So there's no shelter whatsoever for our children when they're outside during this 30-minute break. And we were being informed late at night, Sunday of the week before, that we were to prepare for this brand new policy and procedure that is now in place. So looking at it, I'm an educator at Butte College, and looking at this from an equity point of view, I just felt like it was incredibly unfair to require parents to provide this clothing, especially without warning, when including, I don't have access to all of that right now. And also essentially now we're asking families to, like choose a different kind of program. This is more like an outdoor program, which is not something that I'm prepared for our children. I feel like as educators, we are so resourceful and we have ingenuity, and that there's so many other options out there that we can run programs in our administration that may be more useful for facilitating dry eating for our children. Essentially what I want for our children is for them to be dry when they're having snack, when they're eating. I can't imagine my daughter holding an umbrella, her food container in the other, and then what does she eat with? She has no dry place to sit down other than the pavement. So that's a big concern of mine, and I would really hope that's addressed before next semester begins and the weather becomes even more challenging. Okay, thank you.
Carrie, you said your child was in 5th grade?
Sixth grade Miss Welsh's
grade.
class.
Okay, thank you.
Monica, you went back on mute.
Sorry, I didn't want to, yeah. Any other audience to address the council? Okay, so we are moving on to the consent agenda. Thank you, Carrie. Thank you, Heather. Consent agenda, item 2. Is there any discussion about the consent agenda? Any questions? Okay, so do I hear a motion to accept the consent agenda with the omission of item 2.3?
This is Heather. I will move that we accept the consent agenda with the exclusion of item 2.3.
Great, thank you. I have a first, is there a second?
This is Trisha. I'll second that.
Thank you. I have a first and a second. Is there any further discussion about the consent agenda before we vote on it? Okay, great. I'll do a roll call vote. Starting with Trisha.
Trisha Ateertua, aye.
Laurel.
Aye.
Laura.
Laura Swanson, aye.
Thank you. Chelsea
Aye.
and Heather.
Heather Bonilla, aye.
Thank you. And Monica McDaniel, aye. Okay, so the consent agenda passes with the exception of item number 2.3, which was removed. Okay. Item 3, school governance. 3.1, the finance committee.
Yes, hi. So the Finance Committee actually has met twice since our last board meeting. The first one was our regular meeting, which the big items that we discussed, we're actually bringing to you in the following items of this section. The first interim budget, or the first interim report for Chico Unified, as well as the Lcff budget overview for parents, and the audit and the marketing plan and contract approval, as well as what you'll see in item 3.4, which are the minimum wage adjustments. So I'm not gonna go super into those things because we will be addressing them as individual agenda items, but I do just want to make my board counterparts aware that the Finance Committee has reviewed, discussed, and we do recommend for approval the items that you'll be presented tonight. And really, that's, other than what was on the consent agenda that we just passed, there were no other extraneous items other than the ones we'll see tonight. So. Monica, you're on mute.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Our heater's on, so I feel like it's really noisy. So I don't want there to be that ambient background noise. So thank you so much, Chelsea. So that was 3.1. Shall we move to 3.2? The approval of the Lcff budget overview for parents.
So Monica, that was just the finance committee overview. We actually still need to do 3.1.1, which is the first interim report. And we do actually have to do a motion and a vote on that separate from all other items.
Okay, great. Thank you. And I was going to pull up the board packet on my computer so I reviewed it before, but I wanted to see it from over here. So is there any discussion about the first interim report from the board members?
I would love if Jim is willing, or Susan, to present it for us. That would be really great.
Great idea. Susan?
I'm going to ask Jim to do that.
Okay, Jim.
It's his strength.
Thank you.
And I'm going to mute while he's doing that.
Sure. So while it may look daunting, it's definitely official. The first interim is actually just stating the October actuals and forecast for the year in the official format. So there's no changes here from what the board would have received from October, which is also materially close to November, which you have now also. The big meaning behind the interim is, in theory, if you weren't meeting every month and getting updates, this would be your critical update month. So this is presenting the forecast you received for October. The last time the state had an official report, it was the approved budget. So the first section is the approved budget, which we know is very outdated, given the number of changes that occurred this year. The second section is the actual through October. Actuals at this point in time, revenues are trailing expenses significantly as a matter of timing. So I wouldn't be too worried about what the bottom line is for October actuals. That's something we review every month. And then most importantly, the forecast saying, okay, now as of first interim, as of October, this is how we feel the year will end. And this is where you can see the forecast ending surplus of 118,000 as of the October forecast for the interim. And so that's really the critical point, reporting to the authorizer and then all the way to the state to show, especially in a year like this, where we had to pass a budget with a big deficit because revenue was yet to be determined, showing that as of interim, the organization is confident in the direction of their school for the year. So this would be to vote to accept the first interim report for submission to the authorizer and the state.
Great. Thank you, Jim. Susan, were you going to add something to that?
No, I think he covered it.
Okay. Any questions for Jim or Susan or Chelsea about the first interim report?
I just wanted to make a quick comment. As Jim stated, you know, with the current actuals, with our revenue being lower than our expenses, he said,
and the worst one that's come out of there yet, which has been great. And they've all.
That was interesting. But with that being trailing, I'd like it to be noted that that is something that we are watching as the finance committee closely, and that our final budget is still a balanced budget. We are not in a deficit budget by any means. It's just waiting on the money to come in, and which, due to COVID and the current funding environment, that's a little behind. So we are watching that closely in the event that we do need to, you know, borrow or do any other mitigating tasks. But from a total in to a total expected out, we are in good shape.
Great. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Yeah, it's always a balancing act to keep your eyes on what's coming and to manage it from inside. So I appreciate that there's multiple partners working to that end, because it's a lot.
That's awesome. Good job.
Oh, well, Vicky, have you been here the whole time, Vicky, and I haven't been calling on you? Did she just get here?
Vicky, you're on mute.
What's that, dear? Hello. You're off of mute, but we can't hear you still. Are you possibly turned all the way down?
Vicky, it looks like something's not working with your microphone.
But Monica, I can see that she got here about 2 minutes ago.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you. Welcome now, and we'll include you in the last vote. Or in the next vote. The vote that's we're currently talking about. We're on item 3.1 from the Finance Committee, and we're looking at the approval of the first interim report. So I'm not hearing very much discussion or questions. Is there a motion to accept this report?
Monica, this is Chelsea, and I would like to make a motion that we approve the first interim report and submit it to Chico Unified.
Thank you. So the motion on the table is to accept the first interim report and to submit it to Chico Unified. Is there a second to that?
Heather Bonilla, I'll second.
Thanks, Heather. Any further discussion? Okay, I'm gonna do a vote. So Vicky, let's go ahead and start with you, Vicky, since you're our newest board member on board. Okay, I see a thumbs up and I could read her lips that she said aye. Okay, let's stay for the record that Vicky's into it.
I think maybe she needs to type it in the chat if she can't audibly present her vote. Just for
okay. Yeah, so just type it into the chat, Vicky, just so we have it for official record, please, okay? All right, so Vicky and then Trisha?
Aye. Trisha out there too. Aye.
Thank you. And Laurel?
Laurel Hill Ward, aye.
I love the technology these days. It's hilarious. Thank you.
I had to go sit in my bed, so anyway.
You know what? We're doing it where we
It's
can,
all
right?
good. Thank you.
Thank you. And Laura?
Laura Swanson, aye.
Thank you. And Chelsea?
Aye.
And Heather Bonilla?
Heather Bonilla, aye.
Thank you. And Monica McDaniel, aye. Okay. Item 3.1.2, approval of the Lcff budget overview for parents, which is the next thing down.
Before we go on, I just want to make sure that Vicky's vote is recorded. And
Thank you for making sure of that. I don't see it in the chat yet.
I don't either. So Vicky, when you put it in the chat, maybe reference item 3.1.1 with your vote, so that we can keep track of which item you're voting on. And then just also make sure that the chat is set to everyone and not to one individual.
Yeah, because we want it to be public.
I'm not seeing anything in the chat. Has there been anything added to the chat yet by anybody?
Nope.
Okay.
Maybe if Vicky disconnects and re-add.
Yeah. Chelsea and I just added stuff. Is she suggesting to leave and come back?
I think she was saying she'll go out and back in.
Okay. Why don't we have her abstain for that vote, since we have the quorum for the vote anyway, for that one, and we'll move to the next one and circle her back around for the next one? I'm good? All right, we got a thumbs up from Alex. All right, so 3.1.2 is approved, and with an abstention of Vicky, just because we can't hear her. And then let's move on to the audit, item 3.1.3.
No, Monica, you're off by one because we just approved 3.1.1, which is the first interim report. We need to do
The LCFF. Sorry, I jumped ahead.
Yeah, and that'll be Jim again if he's able to present for us.
So,
Monica,
yeah,
I think it would be better to report her as absent for the vote rather than abstaining for her. I think we should just report her as absent for the vote.
okay, because that's true. She's absent. Okay.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so Jim, can you talk about LCFF, the approval of the LCFF budget overview for parents, please?
Yes, so normally this would be part of the LCAP process, which would occur in June in conjunction with the budget. Because there wasn't an LCAP for 2021 this year, they synced it with the first interim, and it relates to the learning continuity plan that was approved, I want to say September, which is much more scaled back compared to an LCAP. So in form, it looks the same way it would if it were approved with your LCAP last year or presumably next year. But in substance, it's much leaner. And so the goal of the budget overview for parents essentially is to provide a quick snapshot for someone if they were to pick up the LCAP and try to summarize the sources of revenue and really hone in on the supplemental and concentration included in the LCFF funding, because it isn't strictly a restricted grant like, say, Title I, where you either use it for an approved purpose or you have to return it. The state is awarding it with intention to provide supplemental services to high need students. And so they want in the LCAP a description of how the school will utilize those funds to meet those goals, along with the other statewide goals and school specific goals that are included in the LCAP. So since there was no LCAP, they still want to check in to show the plan for those funds. Now, some of those funds were included in the learning continuity plan, but the learning continuity plan really was a response to the pandemic environment, distance learning, planning for potential hybrid learning, and then the learning mitigation funding, learning loss mitigation funding that was awarded. So it was much smaller in dollar volume than the full LCAP. So the opening of the budget overview is same as it would be in a typical year, showing the funding for the organization to provide scale of what the LCAP might address, so that the total funding in the budget, in this case in the first interim, is almost 3.7 million. And then trying to break that out and show of that LCFF is by far the most at almost 2.7, and that supplemental is pared down much lower to 278,000. So that's what they really want to focus on. In addition, this year, response to CARES Act and it calls out the CARES Act to show that the total federal programs, so this would include, when we have the financial presentation, we talk about there was the first segment that was to be used by December, the second much smaller segment to be used by June, and then the ESSER and GEER funds that could be rolled into next year. So excluding the state component, the federal components are roughly 234,000. So it's providing an example to anyone who wanted to pick up the learning continuity plan and lacking an LCAP, or the first interim for that matter, to show what your funding sources were, and then what are the identified programs for high need students for the supplemental funds. So that's kind of where we go to those pages. So after the summary of the revenue, it talks about the learning continuity plan. Now, specifically here, the learning continuity plan was all written for targeted services. So 297,000 total included in the plan, 297,000 identified as targeting high need students. If there is a difference, they ask you to explain why there is no difference here. Additionally, the total budget for the school year is almost 3.6 million. And so they ask to explain, okay, if you have a $3.6 million budget and your learning continuity plan is only roughly 300,000, we just have a quick note to explain that, well, learning continuity plan doesn't relate to facility rent and ongoing teacher salaries, which is, you know, usually the millions of the base budget for a school. That would be common in an LCAP also. LCAP could include those costs, but it almost always excludes rent and probably excludes a lot of the standard teacher salaries and focuses on specializations and supplemental services. So this identifies that and shows of the 3.6, 300 was in the plan, and that 300 is specifically identified for high need students. Then it would compare that to the total funding in the supplemental and deemed that that's actually higher than the supplemental award. So the supplemental award is estimated at 278, and the plan already included plans for 297,000. So it's showing that the school has already initiated a goal to spend more than they were awarded for those services. The last component, which is more LCAP specific, is every year when this is approved along with the LCAP, you would have the LCAP for the new year, and you would have a kind of a report on how actuals related to the LCAP for the last year. And so that didn't happen. That was audited as part of the audit, but it wasn't reported as part of any LCAP. So they just asked for this last section, a check-in on last year's LCAP, estimated 272,000 identified for high need students, and did the school spend that? And so this is reporting out that yes, the school did spend on all its goals as identified in the 1920 LCAP. Not a restricted source fund. So if you didn't, you wouldn't lose the money. You would just explain something was cheaper or some program wasn't, you know, why it didn't line up the way they expected it. So overall, should be a very non-controversial budget overview. All supplemental funding has either been budgeted or fully utilized as described in the plan and the budget approved by the board. I can answer any questions.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions for Jim? About the, yeah, go ahead, sorry, go ahead.
This is Heather, I have a question. So when we are talking about money being specifically spent on services for high needs students, does that mean that some of these funds are maybe being earmarked in the budget to go towards our special ed or resource program or instructional aids salaries, or is it that specific, or are we just kind of saying, oh, we're spending our money on this, and then it's just taken as that?
It is specific as approved in relation to 1920 in the LCAP, in 2021 in the learning continuity plan. Generally not special education, although it could relate to that because it has its own funding source and its own restrictions. Instructional aids is a great example. That would be one of the first targets. That's also supported through Title I. So we might have that included and note that Title I funding is going to that source. And so I'm going to say 278, or I don't remember exactly, roughly 300,000 that was awarded is usually programs in addition to that. It doesn't have to be targeted assistance in the way Title I would, but it is within the goals that are approved in the LCAP to meet the statewide goals, and identifying that those goals will improve the environment or achieve one of those designated goals. Can be for all students, but also specifically for high need students. And so in the case of the 1920, it would relate back to what were the LCAP goals in June 2019 and how those expenses were identified and then carried out. In this year, it was learning continuity. A lot of it had to do with obtaining technology resources for students and maintaining and improving the educational response in light of distance and the plans for hybrid. So this 297 in the learning continuity plan would differ from the usual interventions in an LCAP, and was more specific to the distance environment.
I also had a question. I was just curious how our care funds were being used currently.
Yeah, so the care funds, generally speaking, are what's listed in the 297, the learning continuity plan. It doesn't have to be one-to-one, but a lot of schools, when the learning continuity plan came out, really lined those up. It was coming out that, I need to write a plan about how I'm going to respond, or we are going to respond to the distance learning environment. And oh, by the way, here's this funding for it. So it naturally lined up the same way the Lcff would line up with supplemental and concentration funding. And so the biggest boost was, and one of the #1 targeted items from the state was obtaining technology resources. And then it was, there was PD opportunities and supplemental staffing in this learning environment.
Thank you.
This is Heather. I had a follow-up question, and I think I accidentally muted myself when I started talking. So you mentioned things like technology. So I was wondering, when we just, I think, recently purchased another batch of Chromebooks. So did that purchase then come out of these funds and not out of our Measure K funds?
I'm not familiar with which measure.
Chelsea.
Measure K.
Yeah.
I don't know if we're still using those funds for technology. I know we have in the past, so.
That's a good question.
We did not use the Measure K funds for technology this year. We did use the CARES funds.
Perfect. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you for asking about the CARES funds, Carrie. Any other questions for Jim? And thanks for being proactive about your inquisitions also, Heather. What I think I hear you saying is, can we save some money to do some different choices? Is that sort of what you were asking?
I wasn't implying anything. I was just asking for clarification for myself.
Okay. All right. Any other questions about the local control funds formula? Hearing any other questions, we do need to approve this. So do I hear a motion to approve the local control funds formula overview, budget overview?
I'll second that.
Did we have a first?
Oh, sorry.
You're the first.
First. This is Chelsea. I'll make a motion to approve the Lcff budget overview for parents as presented.
Thank you. And Vicky already jumped ahead and was the second. So we had a first and a second. Great. Thank you. Any other questions or follow-up discussion? Okay, let's go ahead and have a vote. Let's see. Vicky, why don't you go first?
Vicky Wanacott, aye.
Thank you. Trisha?
Trisha out there to aye.
Thank you. Laurel?
Laurel Hillward, aye.
Thank you. Laura?
Laura Swanson, aye.
Thank you. Chelsea?
Aye.
Thank you. Heather?
Heather Bonilla, aye.
Thank you. And Monica McDaniel, aye. Okay, great. So now we're moving on to the audit. And I understand this was reviewed already, and this kind of, so let's move on to the audit.
Yeah, so the audit started in June, and we received it and presented it to the Finance Committee. It's the standard audit, lots of financial details. There were no exceptions, which is always the first page that we look at to see if there are any items of concern for them, and there were none. So it's a clean audit.
Good.
We like clean audits. Any questions for the audit? And the board does need to approve this audit, correct?
Yes.
Okay,
It is the recommendation of the Finance Committee that the board does approve this audit as well.
Great. Thank you, Chelsea.
May I make a motion?
Sure.
Beat me to it.
I move to accept the audit and comment that we appreciate it receiving it without exceptions.
Sounds good. Thank you. Thank you, Laurel. And did you say have a second, Heather?
This is Heather. I'll second.
Fantastic. Thank you. Yes, it's outstanding that we don't have any outstanding things from the audit. Okay, any further discussion about the audit before we vote? Okay, great. I'm going to start at the bottom again. Vicki?
Vicky Wanacott, aye.
Great. Thank you. Trisha?
Trisha out there too, aye.
Thank you. Laurel?
Laurel Hill Ward, aye.
Laura?
Laura Swanson, aye.
Chelsea?
Chelsea Parker, aye.
Thank you. Heather?
Heather Bonilla, aye.
Great. Thank you. And Monica McDaniel, aye. Okay. So moving right along to the marketing plan contract approval. And that's for you, Susan.
I will happily take that on. This is also a recommendation to approve from the Finance Committee. We had a special meeting earlier today. I've met with 4 different marketing companies concerning how to move forward to support the school, to bring in additional enrollments and also for fundraising. The committee asked you to move forward and approve this contract with MC2. There's a couple of reasons. Number one, it is a local firm that has worked with, for example, Butte College for like 16 years. So they're in the area and they know our area. They are focused, first of all, which is what I really loved, on preparing the message that we want to get out. One of the things that came up to me in my first months at Blue Oak was we don't know how to talk about what we do well. And we know that there's often a disconnect between what it is we do and what we're seen as doing in the community. And Waldorf can be so complex that people, that it's hard to explain it. And when we try, it doesn't work very well. So, and one of the things that we talked about is the fact that people that are experts in their field are often not very good at marketing and talking about what they're doing because they understand it so deeply, they have a hard time explaining it on more of a public level. So really appreciated that conversation and the work that they are ready to do. They only select so many clients a year. And so also feeling privileged that they are asking us. Can you move down, Alex, to where it talks about the 3 steps that they will do with us? Right there. So
Just a quick, so this is not in the board packet, correct? I'm looking for it over here.
I don't believe it got into the board packet.
That's fine.
We just approved it today.
Thank you.
So the 3 steps were the discovery consultation where they meet with staff and ask questions, and then they create our messaging plan and give us final deliverables. So that's the portion of the plan that they're ready to do, really helping us create that elevator speech and that presentation the way we need it. If you can move down to the list of deliverables they're talking about. So really talking about getting us that message and what they'll do for the price that they're charging us. Look at that, roll down and then roll down to the dollar amount because I want people to see this. Okay, so what we're talking about is an investment to get the messaging done of about $4,500, and the Finance Committee approved a move from the office staff line item, which has additional funds in it, to the marketing line item of $10,000. This is because the position that is missing in the office staff right now is the parent liaison. I want to make clear that I'm not getting rid of the parent liaison position. We still do want to fill it, but that is the person that focuses on fairs and does one-on-one personal outreach, which we cannot do right now. So it seems like a good time to be investing in this and then moving forward with online marketing. So the finance committee discussed that and is recommending a $10,000 move in the budget from office staff, classified office staff, to the marketing. And so that'll give us money to cover this and then initial actual outreach of marketing on Facebook and so on.
Great. Can we go back up to the deliverables page, just because I want to look at some of the deliverables, please? Thank you. And you said MC2 is local. Where are they? Chico centric or Butte County centric, or what is local?
It's Chico.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'll pull up the website for you and tell you what businesses they've worked with that you will know. Let's see.
And while Susan's doing that, does anybody have any other questions about MC2?
So Schubert's, Pete's Coffee, Nature Company, Butte County, the Giants. Those are some that I recognize that they've worked with. Golden Valley Bank.
Are there any questions for Susan?
I just wanted to comment that I think that looks like a great investment. I was trying to look up what the numbers are right now. I don't know what exactly we get per student in funding, but I think $4,500 is a lot less than what we get for even just one student in a school year. So if investing in these marketing strategies brought us a number of students or even one student, my anticipation was that it would bring us up a lot more than one student. I think that we would see a significant
Right, it would pay for
return.
it would pay for itself, right? Yeah. It looks like they work with Butte County and Butte College and Golden Valley Bank, like you said. Okay. All right, so do I hear a motion to accept this? The marketing plan contract approval for MC2?
So Monica, I would like to ask, and it is the recommendation of the Finance Committee, that we do approve this contract as well as approve the additional funds up to $10,000 total, including.
Okay.
That's the money for the contract, and then money for the next steps of this as needed through the end of the year.
Great, thank you.
Implementation. This is Heather. I would move that we accept item 3.1.4, the marketing plan and contract approval up to the amount that has been earmarked of $10,000 to see it through.
Great, and I'll second that. So we have a first and a second. Is there any further discussion about accepting item 3.1.4 up to the earmarked amount of $10,000 for a marketing plan?
This is Trisha. I think it's super exciting. I know we've been talking about it for a long time, so I'm really excited to see some people in their profession, like this is what they do, like bring light on our school. So
Yeah.
I'm glad that we're finally here.
Agreed. And it adds an air of professionalism to what we're doing and gives us some structure, which is really great. And I like that they're local.
Yeah.
That's kind of huge for me. Thank you. Any other comments or discussion about item 3.1.4? Okay, hearing none, let's go ahead and have a vote. Let's go backwards this time. Let's do Heather.
Heather Bonilla, aye.
Thank you. Chelsea?
Aye.
Thank you. Laura?
Laura Swanson, aye.
Thank you. Laurel?
Laurel Hillward, aye.
Thank you. Vicky?
Vicky Wanacott, aye.
Thank you. Tricia?
Trisha Ateyortua, aye.
Thank you. And Monica McDaniel, aye. Okay. All righty. Great. So now we are on item 3.2, policy review. 3.2.1, the homeless policy.
Yes, so the homeless policy is a requirement of Title I and needs to be updated. Primarily the language here is from the Title I recommendations. So it's really about making sure we're aware of Title I and we have not Title I, of homeless needs, what they are and how we track them and make sure those students are served. So this is a first read of this policy.
And we don't need to read it aloud in public forum. We just kind of read it here. We all look at it, review it. It does give board members an opportunity to ask questions about this policy if there are any. Do any members of the board have questions about the education for homeless children and youth policy that's before us?
Do you know if we have any confirmed homeless students at this time?
Yes, we do.
That would be impacted by this?
Yes, we do. And we are currently tracking them and working with them as this is directed. So the policy doesn't change anything about the way we're working. It just documents it.
It says that you had, when there are at least 15 homeless students at Blue Oak, the local control and accountability plan shall include goals and specific actions. But aren't you doing that already? Even if you only had 10?
Yes, we're already prioritizing any homeless students that we have.
Okay.
It's just that we're not required to put a specific goal for them.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, so in essence, Vicki, our policies should really define like the minimum that we will do, and then our procedures, our on-site procedures, then we would put that down and of course go and do like we're doing.
Right. Okay.
Did we have a homeless policy in place prior to this?
Not that I'm aware of, Monica.
That's what I was gonna say, because it feels like this is all brand new, which I think is really great. I mean, I know we're accommodating people, but it's nice to have it written.
Yeah, and they're recognized in the Lcff. So, you know, you've been serving them for a long time, you know, with recognition of their state.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's so timely considering the tragedies of the last few years. Any other comment?
Yeah. This is Laura, Monica. I just wanted to echo that I'm excited to have this in writing, and I understand that the language isn't language that Blue Oak came up with, and this might be totally outside the scope of what we're working on with this, but I was wondering if it's possible to switch it to person first language. So it'd be like students who are homeless instead of homeless students.
Absolutely, we could do that, Laura.
I really appreciate that, Laura. Thank you. And my background is more person first language for people with any disabilities or exceptional needs, but thank you for that. Thank you very much.
I'm glad we can switch it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. And that's why we have a couple of reads. Okay, without, in addition to, or aside from the person first language that we're going to use to modify this document, are there any other questions or comments? And I have a question. Do you know about how many homeless students or families we have currently?
I do not have that number off the top of my head, Monica.
Okay, I was just curious.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if it's been fluctuating the last few years, again, because of the recent tragedies.
It has. It was, of course, a huge influx or representation of homeless during the process of the campfire, because everyone who lost their home in Paradise in that year became a homeless student. And of course, that has dropped quite significantly now, but that, and we haven't seen, we saw some increase because of the fires this year, but nothing as significant as the campfire.
Okay.
Is there a second page to this?
Yes.
Can we scroll to the next page? Thank you. Susan, are we doing just a read through on this for this meeting and then looking at it again at our next meeting? Or were you wanting, are you looking for approval during this meeting for this item?
This is your first read, so we will bring it back to you in January for approval.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions about this item before we move on to the next item? And we'll vote on this in January. Okay. All right, we ready to move on? Okay, great, thank you. Okay, so item 3.3, outdoor learning spaces.
That is for Buck.
Buck, our facilities manager / safety coordinator.
Yes.
Hello.
Hello.
What would you like to know?
Well, what are we doing for outdoor learning spaces?
So the plan, when we put out the safety reopening plan, was to have some spaces that teachers could utilize if they want to be outside more than the allotted, 30 minutes for snack to teach. And so initially I thought it would work pretty well. We just grabbed 4 areas of the campus that were, I think, suited best for outdoor learning. We had we were concerned about the like seating and taking desks in and out. And so there happened to be a tree down the road that was taken down, and I hauled the whole tree over here, and with the anticipation of using the logs and stumps for chairs. And we had some art boards set aside, about 150 of those to use for the students for like a tabletop. So we just quickly threw up the rounds and the areas that were designated for the outdoor learning classes, and then I hadn't received much interest from that point on. So they've been neglected. Some of the teachers want the logs in their area, their zones for their snack time, and so that I've been working on that, getting those out, and those have been nice. So the kids have somewhere to sit rather than on the cement or the pavement. And also procured 70 desks and chairs from Chico State. They were donated to us. So those are real nice, and they're outdoors, so you don't have to worry about them. They're free, so you don't have to worry about taking care of them too much or moving them inside or outside. They're pretty much weatherproof. And so, I mean, I haven't heard much demand for the outdoor learning spaces classes. And that was my idea originally. I thought it would be, I was thinking we'd need one for each class eventually, but I don't know if it's the weather, the coldness or whatnot. It hasn't really gotten any traction, and I haven't seen a lot of interest in it. So I'm not sure we're like what we're trying to do here with this idea, or do you want to expand on it more? Would you like to see more use of
Well,
it? Or
Yeah, so I know that Kari wanted to do outdoor learning, but then was it prohibitive having desks 6 feet apart because it got too big, or is there overstructure? I think there was an overstructure, but then it wasn't substantial enough for her class. And then we heard a parent mention earlier that they wanted to see some other sort of structures so kids weren't getting rained on, kind of thing. There used to be tables and stuff in the back space. I don't know if there still are. It's been a while since I've been out there.
yeah, they're still there. Tables are still there. We dabbled in putting up some coverage a couple years ago, 2 years ago, to cover the lunch area with some tarps. That never really came to fruition. But Kari's situation is different from what I was envisioning. Kari's is like a permanent outdoor classroom, defined walls, enclosed, heaters, space for everybody, 6 feet apart. It would have been approximately 1,200 square feet, maybe 1,400 square feet, and would have obstructed that whole side of the drop off and pick up parent student areas and the lanes that go around. It just really wasn't feasible in the size that we needed. If it was smaller, yes. If we had a different campus, probably have a better area to do that in. But it was, that's month in, month out, day in, day out of a structure that would be semi-permanent. It wouldn't just be something we'd throw up. It would have been, it would be a lot of maintenance and upkeep. And I mean, it was a big endeavor. I said yes initially, and I realized we both discussed it, Kari and I, and as we were doing it, we kind of would go, oh my gosh, we need this now. And then, okay, we need this now. And it just kept, the items kept mounting. And by the end of it, it wasn't feasible. It wasn't realistic to do what we needed to do. Yeah.
So Monica, for Kari's specific need, we have been talking about utilizing the atrium and the need to get that area worked out. There are already tables there that have umbrellas. So that is a possibility, and it's right outside the room, and that's on her request. Yes. So we're moving forward to do something for Kari specifically in this situation. And then just giving spaces available to teachers when, so that they can do classes outside. And I think the children are really enjoying their playtime outside right now, but I'm not sure with the need to Zoom with distance learning and other things, that it isn't just one too many things for the teachers to try to manage, to be moving their on-site students off-site, making sure their video cameras work and all of that. There's just a lot of little pieces going on right now. So we're giving them the space, as Buck says. We have new, they're basically throwaway desks that look like what you sat in high school, and those are available for the teachers to use. We also have the stumps, which are much more Waldorfy. So we're working on developing that right now, but a consistent use of outdoor space really hasn't been, other than the situation with Kari, hasn't been something that teachers have been jumping at doing. So
I have Heather. Oh.
So Laurel and then Heather.
Okay.
I have a question, a couple of questions, and one is that seating available to them at times other than for instruction? And would it be economically feasible to provide one or two of those propane heaters where the heating element is up high enough where it wouldn't be a safety issue? And Buck, thank you. I know you're taxed in many ways, and thank you for trying to think about this and be creative. But I'm just wondering if there might be some ways that when students are outdoors, they can be made a little bit more physically comfortable. I'll yield there. Thank you.
I had an idea relating to your thought, Laurel. I was driving through for materials pickup yesterday, and I saw all those chairs off to the back of campus. And I know that we have really generous eaves all around the sides of our school building. I think they're 6 to 8 feet. I'm wondering if we can distribute those chairs along the, under the eaves around the building for students to use for eating during snack, so that they can be, or for outside time during class or whatnot. I don't know if that would be feasible.
That's a good idea, Heather. And then they could be asked not to move them, you know, for appropriate distances, you know. I mean, certainly the students could be made to understand that we're sympathetic to their desire to cluster, but need them to have a little bit of space. So.
Yeah, that's totally feasible, getting the desks around the eaves. That we do run into problems though with the 6 foot separation. You know, the allotted space per class would be limited. And 8 feet is one desk. You know, you can't really fit 2 desks in there. But yeah, we get a few in there. In terms of the snack, I thought they can't eat in their classrooms at all. Is that what I thought we were gonna, if it was raining out, it's gonna be outside all the time, no matter what? That's the deal?
Well, is it a matter of them being unmasked to have a snack, and so they want to go outside to have a snack so they can take their mask off? Is that what the issue is?
Yeah. So we looked at a couple of different options. We have the kids under the eaves, if the rain is such that they wouldn't be able to be outside at all, which we haven't had that heavy day too much. And so that was the intent, is that they would be under the eaves when, if they needed to be outside. Part of the issue is, yes, eating, taking their masks off inside. The other part of the issue is we have a process of cleaning each of the classrooms every 2 hours. So that allows for that to happen. Some of the teachers, they do have the choice to stay in if they take on the role of cleaning their classrooms themselves. So that's what the options are. Excuse me.
This is Heather. I have another question. I was wondering, would it be possible to allocate funds from any department for purchasing some pop-up tents? Those would be handy in this situation, kind of like what you see some of the restaurants are using for outdoor dining. And hopefully when things go back to normal and we're back to having festivals, they would also come in handy for festivals in the future.
Yeah, and I was going to say, don't we have some of those from doing festivals from the past? It seems like there was a big long tent that we used to have at Mayfairs. We did the tostadas underneath, and yeah, is that just 10 million years ago? And I'm out of.
Yes, 10 million years ago.
She's just laughing at me.
Missing,
back when I was a kindergarten parent. What?
They're missing a lot of parts. We went through them. They're missing a lot of parts, and we donated them.
Okay.
So, okay. And Monica, the problem that we had is we tried to set up to use those. We actually ordered some for Kari's class when we tried that, and they aren't stable enough to stand up for wind or to be, you know, if anywhere in our yard that isn't really flat, to have students under that, there were just all sorts of little details that weren't working.
It would take a lot of them also.
Enough. Yeah.
And it would take a lot of them. So even if there was most sturdy of them, it would take 4 of them. And that would only cover, 10 students at the most, maybe less.
Sure.
Good quality ones very quickly run into quite a bit of money. The little cheap ones don't hold up in the wind at all.
They're not worth it. Brianna, you typed into the chat that a true functioning outdoor classroom is a far easier idea in theory than in reality. I just wanted to chat about that for a second, only because it's always been my understanding that one of the cornerstones of Waldorf education is connection to nature. And so I remember, my kids being asked to go outside and an extra set of rain boots being left at school, and, you know, bring your jacket because they're going to be outside, and that kind of attitude. And I thought that kind of pedagogical approach might come in handy during COVID, but I mean, maybe I'm just kind of mixing the two up kind of too generally and not for like a stable classroom. I mean, can you share that expand on what you put in the chat, Brianna?
Yeah, thanks for asking about that, Monica. And thanks for clarifying. I'm not meaning, I think you're spot on in that you're maybe a little bit misunderstanding what I mean. I very much agree that Waldorf should be an indoor and outdoor classroom experience. And that's something that we've discussed a lot around planning that. And that was part of why the planning committee worked to have a map where like each class cohort has a space around school so that classes can have somewhere to go outside and be outside. And I think, you know, it is an understandable expectation for the kids to be ready to be outside and possibly like at least mild to moderately inclement weather. You know, having a plan for when it's really nasty or really cold or whatever like that is very important. And kind of our current plan right now is using the eaves and some things like that. And it's definitely under development as this situation is not an easy one and changes often. But I think the idea of like an outdoor classroom sounds good in theory, like something that can just be done, but kind of like the issues that Buck and Susan have listed. Like when I hear outdoor classrooms and start hearing about building structures and things like that, that's like you're taking your entire operation outside. That's really challenging right now, especially for, as I would think almost half of us are concurrently Zooming with our students. So like I have to figure out a plan even to let my students go outside to like do movement, because I have to be able to take like my computer worth of students with me for what I'm doing. And yeah, like yeah, I mean, just something as simple as really working out how you would do sitting on stumps and lap seats, like for a whole day, that's hard and that's uncomfortable. And it's, you know, I think they're good. I think it's the way Buck's maybe finding that they're not getting used as often as he expected, is that the idea is a great one. And I'm glad we have that space available, but really truly moving our classroom operations in their entirety or in large chunks of them outside is pretty complicated right now. And I know for me as a Waldorf teacher, a hybrid Waldorf teacher has me much more stationary than I would be in my regular times. And it's frustrating, but it's kind of the reality of like the give and take for all of this. For me, it was a high priority to have my remote students Zoom in, partially for their involvement with the class and their connection to the class, partially for my management of what I'm doing. And that makes me pretty tied to my tech. Some of our scheduling conflicts are hard too. We have a kind of a tight day right now to utilize our on-campus time as much as we possibly can. And so I don't want to minimize not using outdoor classrooms, but I just kind of want to clarify from the teacher's perspective that truly operating a hybrid model classroom outside right now is a pretty significant undertaking. So hopefully that answers your question.
That whole COVID piece, like anything that we've seen or done before, the COVID piece adds a whole other layer of management. And like I wanted to share with Carrie that, you know, like when we were asked to do outside stuff, the call from the teacher came, and bring your extra boots that don't fit you anymore because they're going to fit somebody else. So there was a lot of sharing of jackets and boots because everyone was, like, to adjust your equity mention, you know, everybody like brought stuff, and they actually brought stuff to share. And so everybody had jackets and boots because we sort of made sure that that happened as more of a socialistic sort of group as a classroom, you know, because you knew that when someone grew, or like when kids would grow out of their boots, they would hand them down to the younger grade, you know, because rain boots were standard issue for most Waldorf kids, but that can't happen in today's situation the way it could before. So that's a piece that needs to be considered. Is there any other questions or conversation around the outdoor learning spaces?
Yes.
It sounds like we're not gonna.
Yes, please.
Carrie sorry, Carrie, but I've had my hand raised in the participant.
I'm sorry, I didn't see that. I see that, Chelsea. Go
I'll
ahead.
wait. I do have
And
a
then Carrie next.
that I would really like to address to my fellow council members. One of the things to be mindful of, I mean, I really appreciate Carrie's concerns, and about the distancing and in the rain versus under the eaves to be able to eat. And I did have a similar question. So I have a couple of points, because we were talking about that teachers have the option, or students have the option, to be under the eaves if it's raining. But the reality is, if there's 16 students under the eaves outside the door of their classroom, that's substantially less than 6 feet apart with masks off and eating. So that seems like a much less safe environment than being 6 feet apart, sitting in their desks where they're not moving around in their classroom, as well as somebody I think even mentioned restaurant and earlier. So the requirement for restaurants when they're allowed to be open is to be 6 feet apart as a safe distance for unmasked eating, which is what we're already doing in our classrooms. And then I hear that the classrooms need to be vacated to be cleaned every 2 hours. And although I appreciate the attention to germs, I wonder if that's not maybe excessive based on the fact that students aren't changing desks during that period of time. And so do we really need to wipe a desk that only one student has breathed on or sat in every 2 hours? Is that really an effective use of our staff's when the materials and the desks and such aren't being shared? Especially when we're talking about, like, yes, we are fortunate, not from a nature point of view, but from a logistical point of view, that we haven't had a substantial amount of rain. But I like to think that we can expect it and that it will be coming. And I think ensuring that our students do have a dry place to be, especially while they're eating, is so very important. And with only a limited amount of time during the day to be in school, thinking about the after snack time of being in wet pants or wet boots, when, like, logistically to go to the bathroom to then change into dry clothes would be a nightmare at best. So I really do think that we have to also, like, that balance between the abundance of caution and the reality of execution. And I do appreciate that comment from Ms. Siha about the safety plan. I do recall reviewing it and approving it, and it really did make sense as we were reopening in a very careful and cautious environment where we didn't have a lot of data on what the spread and transmission was going to look like in schools. And I think from our standpoint of being at 0 cases transmitted, and even Chico Unified with over 13,000 students in the district, only 67 students and 11 staff. And it was actually reported at the board meeting this week, Chico Unified's board meeting, that actually only 1 staff case and 1 student case were contact traced to an on-campus contact of transmission. So really that number is 2 cases for actual on-campus exposure and then contraction of the virus. So I think maybe we need to revisit the safety plan and determine whether or not having a dry space to eat is more important than wiping the desks down every 2 hours.
Yeah, and just to dovetail on what you said, Chelsea, and we'll have other people to call on, is that we knew that when we approved the plan, it would be fluid. So we knew that, we would take that as just a base and then we would adjust it as we went. So Carrie, you were next. Riley Gate is okay. And then Buck is after that. And then we have comments. So Carrie, go next.
What I said really aligned with what Chelsea spoke to. I just wanted to throw out an idea that perhaps we can utilize hallways or stagger breaks. So that way outdoor space is more free. Thank you.
More available to have that distancing that we're talking about.
Yes, that was the much better word.
Okay, yeah, no, that's cool. I just want to make sure I got you correct. Yeah, great. Thank you. And then Buck?
I think the impression that we're going to make all the kids eat out in the rain, no matter what, is being the thought that we're going to try to do here. That's not it at all. We're not going to make the kids eat out in the rain every day. I'm pretty sure that's not our intent. So I think maybe we're getting a little lost in that aspect of it. You're all picturing your kids out in the rain, sitting in the cement, freezing. And I have 3 kids here myself, and that's not the case at all. So that I think we should maybe get away from that exact line of thought with what Chelsea's saying, though, about minimizing the classroom cleaning. I believe it is necessary. It's not just the desks, it's all the high touch areas. And that can be maybe skipped a day here or there due to the weather. If it's, storming outside, we need to eat inside for that day. And it's a snack. It's not a recess. It's time to get up and move around a little bit, but it's not a substantial time off. And really, I just want to say that it's not my intent or any of our intent to make the kids out. Because I remember this being an issue in the past as well. Having the kids outside at a certain temperature or wind, variance. And it was never my intent to have everybody outside if they were uncomfortable. And, there's some limits, the temperature and the rain obviously coming down, and how far do we push it for the kids to be outside? It's definitely on our minds, and it's not that we're not thinking about this at all. We are thinking about it. And I wanted to make sure that y'all know that that's not, I think we got lost there a little bit on that. We want the kids to be warm and comfortable. That's our priority. The COVID-19, is absolutely a priority as well. So it's just finding a comfortable blend with those two and kind of making it work for everybody. I'm always open for suggestions, outdoor spaces, pop tents, tarps, however we want to do it, or we just stay in the classrooms and maybe kind of develop some kind of system there. We did that last year and all the years before for rainy days with lunch and recesses. So, we could probably make something work. I know we're a little more restricted right now with the COVID-19 spacing, but we could probably figure something out. As it is, everybody is 6 feet apart in the classrooms, like Chelsea was saying. So at their desks, and those days, the teachers and students can be responsible for cleaning their desks. We have a food safe Purell sanitizer that's very usable, and that's totally feasible. So that's all very in the realm of reality. It's right there. You guys are on the right track. I don't think we should concentrate too much on the, going out in the rain every day. So,
well, Buck, I think that's the focus, because that's the notice that was sent out to families.
Yeah, that was the notice.
I think that it's important to ensure that it's not just assumed that only pertains to some rainy days.
Yeah. How do we do this in the past, though?
Asked to bring umbrellas, galoshes, gloves, raincoats, and maybe even an extra set of clothes. That was in the past. That was what came out on Sunday. Sunday, I believe, is when that was. What
do we do in the past, though? Didn't we ask that as well in the last 10 years?
I always remember being asked that.
In the past, Buck, there was always the option to be able to be under the awning, because it wasn't an issue for students to have to be 6 feet apart.
Yeah, I understand that.
Also with changing of clothes and things, there weren't restrictions on how many students could be in the bathroom to be able to change clothes, or to be able to get into a dry environment safely. So I think the concern is not whether or not students can go outside in the rain, it's whether or not students can not be in the rain if they so choose. And especially because we're not talking about just a recess time, but a time where logistically they're consuming food, and being asked to bring an umbrella to keep themselves and their food dry while they're eating their food, I think is a lot different than if your kid wants to play in the rain, we're going to let them to make sure they have clothing.
Right.
So
they can go puddle jumping. Yeah. And a couple of comments in the chat that I think are relevant to this conversation, because we're talking about eating times. Restaurants are not currently allowed to have indoor operations under the purple tier. So we're talking about times when the kids remove their mask to consume food, and then indoor eating is a higher concern than outdoor eating for COVID spread because of airflow. So, you know, it's a lot of different things. And I think that finding safe distance places where, I mean, I know when I go to work, for instance, and I want to take my mask off and have my lunch, it's like really hard to find a place where nobody else is. So I could take that off and eat that really quick and then mask back up. I mean, and I'm just one person with 16 other, not 16 other small germ factories near me. So Susan?
So I was trying to figure out how to raise my hand. So
that was a good way, I saw.
I definitely hear, hear the concern, and we can readdress it. I want to say two things. Number one, the break for snack is 10 minutes. The teachers are taking longer on a regular basis because the kids are enjoying playing outside so much. So the actual snack time is 10 minutes. And so when we talk about the kids being outside for that 10 minutes on a rainy day so that we can clean the classrooms, that's very different from a half an hour. I also will tell you that there is as much concern about eating in a classroom than has been expressed here about eating outside. So this is what you're hearing, and I understand it because we sent out that posting, but yet those who agree with it are not here. And I will say that from the perspective, and when Chelsea explains what she heard as far as the posting goes, I get it. We also have always said, as you mentioned, Monica, we've always talked about kids are going to be outside, as you said, with the outdoor classroom discussion. And so make sure you bring a coat and make sure you bring, a change of socks and so on. And that was the intent, is just to remind parents that that's part of what we have here to make sure that they do wear coats. I do understand the different meaning though. So we will go back and revisit that. But I wanted to share that information, that the intent at the time of saying we're going to have them outside for 10 minutes a day and under the eaves was not a half an hour in the storm. So.
Okay, great. Sounds like we've got a little bit more work to do and be thinking about it. It sounds like we've even come up with some possible easy solutions tonight. Are people feeling ready to move on from this topic? Laura?
I have one more comment.
Okay.
More comment. And
okay.
It's not so much directed to Buck as just a question. Maybe if the kids had a brief eating break, as you've done in the past, 10 minutes, and then if the socialization is important to them outside or inside, maybe then, if they're getting 20 minutes or a half hour, whatever it is, maybe the eating break could go back to the 10 minutes and they could have an additional time that the teacher names as socialization time, and they're masked and they're outdoors or indoors or whatever. But that might be a way to address it, and then anyway, just a thought, that they have both, but they're clearly delineated.
A lot of teachers have been doing that. They have them sit on the stumps for 10 minutes, eat. When you're done sitting on the stumps, and you're done eating, then you can leave the stumps and go play.
I love that you have stumps for them to sit on. You know what I mean?
It was harder than I thought to do.
Okay, great. Well, let's wrap this up. We got lots of food for thought to move forward, and let's move on. Minimum wage adjustments, item 3.4, 3.4.1 classified pay scale.
So minimum wage increases again in January. We were not sure that that was going to go through with COVID, but there's been no indication that it's not. So we reviewed this with the finance committee, and Alex, can you put the actual pay scale up? Yeah. So we reviewed this with the finance committee, and they are suggesting your approval of this. There's two pieces of it. The first one is we eliminated the strictly yard duty line 2, allowing us to utilize teachers' aides as also to cover the yard duty. There's a number of training issues that helps, and time management for staffing that helps. So we did that. That eliminated the line 13, and then we increased the starting salary of line 3 or step 3 to the $14 an hour, which is our minimum wage. So that means that everyone will start at $14 an hour or higher. And that gives raises that I believe range from 35 cents an hour to $1.60 an hour, depending on where they are, you know, diagonally from one end to the other end of the pay scale. And it's moved, the calculations are moved so that the entire pay scale was increased, and that was the decision of the Finance Committee to recommend that for equity issues.
And so this moves us into compliance with minimum wage, is that correct?
Yes, this puts us in compliance for January 1st, 2021. There is scheduled another minimum wage increase in 2022. So that's some of the information that you get in the written is my discussion with the Finance Committee about our need to continue to address the steps here.
And as Susan said, the Finance Committee did discuss this, and our recommendation is the schedule that's being presented to you. We did not opt to just raise the lower end to meet the minimum wage. We opted to have that trickle through the pay scale, because lowering the bottom just brings the top closer to minimum wage. So that earned time then is negated or rolled back. And so that was the recommendation that we made. The cost is manageable. And then in the spring budget discussion, setting the budget for the 2021-22 school year, as Susan said, we will have another increase during that time. So we will be discussing, then revisiting the pay scale in the spring to account for that.
I have a question. Isn't there even a legal requirement or possibly a union requirement that there be a certain amount on top of minimum wage for some of the positions?
So Laurel, that's for salaried positions. There are requirements for that. This is only the classified pay scale that we're looking at. We already, the certificated, the salaried pay scale for the certificated staff was the one that we looked at a few months ago.
Okay, thank you, Chelsea.
You know, thank you so much for all your hard work and input, Chelsea, because I would probably make different choices if I was posed with this task. And so I really appreciate your insights about how to do this equitably for people and to get us caught up on this, because it's so important. Are there any questions or comments about the classified pay scale? Minimum wage adjustments.
I just wanted to say that's great. Thumbs up.
Agreed.
All right, sounds like we might be time for calling a motion.
This is Heather. I would move that we approve the classified pay scale
adjustments.
Thank you.
Kadoki. And I see Trisha's off mute.
Yeah, I'll second it.
Okay. Laurel, did you want to give a second, or did you want to comment? Okay, we have a first. Thank you. We have a first and a second. Any further discussion about the minimum wage adjustments? Okay, hearing none, let's go ahead and call for a vote. Trisha?
Trisha Ate Artua, aye.
Thank you. Laura?
Laura Swanson, aye.
Vicky?
Vicky Wanacott, aye.
Laurel?
Laurel Hill Ward, aye.
Chelsea?
Aye.
And Heather Bonilla.
Heather Bonilla, aye.
Thank you. And Monica McDaniel, aye. All right. Thank you again for helping to get us in compliance. So important. And then item, where am I? Item 3.4.2, the facilities manager / safety coordinator.
And this is the same issue with this position. We addressed the minimum wage with the salary schedule with certificated employees, which is the majority of our salaried. However, this position is also salaried. And so in reviewing it, I realized that we were not where we needed to be for this. So I'm asking for this increase and then committing to establishing an administrative pay scale during the process of the spring budget updates and changes or preparation for next year.
Okay.
Oh.
So what do we need to do for this item? I'm sorry.
So this, oh, sorry. I was just gonna say, we do need to approve the wage for the facilities safety coordinator position to be in compliant or to continue to be in compliance as the first of the year increases happen for minimum wage. Salaried positions have a formulary, they have to be at least double minimum wage. And so we also have to review those when minimum wage changes go into place.
Okay,
do you have the other sheet where I put, I believe it was his annual salary on it?
Yeah, because I don't see it in the packet.
Yeah. I think it was a cover sheet. There it is. Yeah. So annual salary, yeah. To 53.
I just want to make sure I'm understanding why this position is kind of like the exception. Are there other positions like this, or is this, for whatever reason, the only one that's affected?
He is not, this position is not on a classified, so yes, he is unique in many ways. He is not on the certificated pay scale because that pay scale requires a certificate it's a credentialed teacher. He would be on an administrative pay scale if we had one, but we don't have one yet. I did start the process in 2018. It did not get finished. So I apologize for that. So, and the two other administrators are not close to minimum wage. So that's why his comes in to be directly affected mid-year.
So we've already done number one of the two things that the Finance Committee recommends, correct? We just did that. So now we're on number two of the things that the Finance Committee has recommended for us to take action on. Am I correct?
Can I make a quick comment?
Okay.
Just quickly, I wanted to note Susan's apology for not completing that. And in prioritizing tasks, Susan, while I appreciate your apology, so much has happened. I just want to note that I feel like things like that sometimes get prioritized under forest fires and pandemics. So thank you.
Thank you.
That was my
Thank
comment.
you. That's a great comment. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. So do I hear a motion to approve item 3.4.2?
This is Chelsea. I will make the motion to approve item 3.4.2 to increase the annual salary of facilities manager / safety coordinator to $53,383.
Thank you. I have a first. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Laurel raised her hand and Vicky said
No,
it.
it's fine.
Okay.
I'm doing a lot of
We have
talking.
a first and a second and even a third. All right, thank you, everybody. So any further discussion about this item? Okay, hearing none, we'll have a vote. Vicky, we'll go with you.
Vicky Wanacott, aye.
Thank you. Tricia?
Trisha Ate aye.
Thank you. Laurel?
Laurel, aye.
Laura?
Laura Swanson, aye.
Chelsea?
Aye.
Thank you. You're great at multitasking, by the way. It's amazing to watch all that you get done.
I'm trying to take notes.
Yeah, you're doing great. You're doing great. And Heather?
Heather Bonilla, aye.
Thank you. And Monica McDaniel, aye. Okay, Buck, I just want to say thank you so much for all the hard work that you do to keep us safe, to keep us happy, to keep us clean. And I wanted to say earlier that to me, it makes a difference that you have a stake in this game with your 3 children that attend our school. I know that you care anyway, because you're just that kind of person, but the fact that your own children go there and that so much of the love and intent that you put in has to do with you just being a dad also really is meaningful to me. So I feel really grateful to have you part of our community, and thank you so much.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity. I've learned as much from everyone here as I have from everybody else in my whole life. So Blue Oak has been a base of me improving myself and then giving back to Blue Oak as much as I possibly can and being a better person for it. So, and my kids are awesome, and everybody here is on the level. Very trustworthy people. I appreciate every single one of you and the community, and you're all just fantastic, like pillars of the community. I really think a lot of everyone here. So thank you.
Wow, how nice.
Thanks.
Thank you, Buck.
Okay, let's move on to item 3.5, hybrid distance plan. And I see we have some comments from the public submitted around this item. Susan, do you want to talk about item 3.5.1, our current status?
Sure. First, the comments that came in when I posted our that we would be further discussing this, I let parents know that they could respond to my post and that I would share that information with you. So this is the information take place last week, and all 3 are really appreciating the on-site program that we have. So we are currently continuing with a hybrid program on-site and the distance learning over the Zoom calls. Most of the teachers at some point during their day, if not their full day, depending on the age and appropriateness, are Zooming from their classroom when their on-site students are on. And then once the on-site students go home at a little after 12, then afternoon programs are fully distance, and the teachers are meeting with students then. They are allowed to flex or work their schedules based on what works, not only for things like specialties, but also around the age of the classroom. So we're seeing different things, of course, in 1st grade than we're seeing in 8th grade. And I think that's part of the strength of the program. The teachers are able to develop what is going to work for their classroom. So we're very appreciative of that. Teachers are working very hard. We are all working very hard. But having the 2 options, I would be remiss if I didn't say that it's a lot of work, and we're really looking forward to a couple of weeks off from doing both of those. But a lot of thoughtfulness and work has gone into that. We reached out today to families to see if more families wanted to come on site. And so we are, Kelly Maki, the registrar, is collecting that data starting today to see what we can do to expand it. So that's the current status as we are doing both programs. There's some concern, that the change for the students that are distancing is a reduction in really that relationship with teachers. So there's some concern about that. But overall, the work is getting done, and teachers are working very hard to get to serve the students in the community and the families.
Thank you. So I guess we need to think about item 3.5.2. Are we moving on? Are we doing these both at the same time to talk about potential January options? And then I don't want it to get lost that there was a surge in COVID cases over the weekend.
Yeah, so that information, when we prepared the packet on Friday and even this afternoon when I was doing my final checks, was not available. So so the intent of this is to move forward and begin the discussion that the board wanted to have about what was going to happen in January, specifically after the end of the semester, which is what you asked, but also being realistic with the current surge. Were there other things we needed to do in January? One of the suggestions was that we would stay on distance for the first week in January as people come back from vacation, and would have those extra days to isolate. And now we have the current increase that happened this afternoon, and the a valid discussion that needs to happen. We have 2 more days of school on site. Should we remain open for those 2 days or not? The only input that I would have is that it would be by a family's situation to get the information out that they can't bring their kids to school tomorrow. It would be a very short period of time. And those parents that would want it may not be represented tonight because they're not expecting that discussion.
Tough time.
Heather is asking about Friday. Friday is a distance learning day already, Heather. So they would not be on campus. And I cannot say to close the school for the 2 days, because we would have to then have to change our calendar and add 2 days later. But I could see if the board wanted to do distance learning for the next 2 days instead of having kids on campus. That's a possibility.
Could we hear from Brianna on this?
I kind of agree with Susan that I think the reality of families being ready for this tomorrow, we would have families showing up that we would then have to turn around who don't have plans for childcare and things like that. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a valid concern. If we want to potentially decide on Thursday is one day, I don't know. This is a really hard one. This gets into a realm of a decision I don't want to have to be the one to make, but I do think.
Right. I'm just wondering about what the teachers might feel or think, and, thinking of them too.
I mean, this weighs really heavily on all of us. I know we're all getting tested and quarantining to even consider like seeing our families and things like that over break. Yeah, I mean, I think the teachers are incredibly mindful to the safety risk that is teaching right now. We're currently the only thing still open that allows that level of in-person instruction. And I think, speaking for myself, I do want to be teaching in person, but it is with a pretty significant weight on my shoulders of what that means. But yeah, the simple question of if we're going to be considering going to distance for the remaining days before break, I think we would cause more trouble making a call like that this late at night for tomorrow.
Okay.
I have to agree with Brianna. What is the actual facts that are making this decision so important to make tonight? I know there's been a surge in the county, but why does Tuesday night's numbers make it necessary?
I think if I could address that a little bit, and then maybe someone else will have things to say also. We get the final reports for the week on Tuesday afternoon at 2 o'clock. So that's everything else builds up to that. And then Tuesday afternoon, 2 o'clock, we get, this is really what happened this week. And so we got that number today, and we went up from 472 cases last week to over 900 cases, I think 950 cases this week. So we're seeing a consistent increase over the past 4 weeks. Before, when we made the decision to open, we were running around 40 cases a week. So you can see what that looks like. And so I think the question is, you know, are we when we look at that sort of a surge, what is the risk that we are going to end up with a significant case at the school? We really don't have time to even know that. So it would be at this point, if there are children coming to school who have not been diagnosed with COVID and not shown any symptoms that might spread the disease to other children. Having said that, we are doing all of the things that we're expected to do to keep a school clean and protected, with face masks, with hand washing, with sanitizing, all of those things to probably the greatest extent that's being done anywhere in the community. So yeah, so that is why I can see that Heather brought that up for this evening.
Right, and Heather's has her hand up. And I just want to make one comment too, and then Vicki, I'll call on you next, okay? I just want to make a comment that the item is about potential January options. I didn't realize this was going to involve a conversation about this week. So I just want to know if we want to stay on task with that. Anyway, Heather had her hand up. And then Vicki.
Thank you. In relation to discussing our plans for January, but first, just because this just came up, to offshoot off of what we were talking about for this week, could we offer families who would like to do distance learning? I don't know how teachers are managing the different students that are on site versus not on site, but for families like Heather's who they're concerned about continuing the rest of the week on campus, could they just do distance learning while we still offer distance learning for the students that absolutely needed it? Could we put out a request to students, if you don't really need it, could you stay home this week out of consideration for our teachers? Is that a reasonable request to make? That was my initial thought on the offshoot. And thank you so much, Brianna and Riley and all of the teachers. This is just got to be the hardest thing ever to go through in your career that you never would have anticipated or been able to prepare for. So you guys are just being amazing. And I'm so sorry that you have to be dealing with this.
Yeah. So much appreciated.
My thoughts on January. My older son is attending Inspire High School, and they chose to remain only distance learning for the entire first semester. So they have not opened up their campus at all. And they also recently decided to continue distance learning only through the remainder of the school year. So there are schools in our community who have come up with a well thought out plan, and they're sticking to that plan and seeing that through the end of the school year. We've already opened up our campus to some students. And so in my view, our question is whether we continue the plan that we have set forth now and can remain partially open for the remainder of the year, or go back to only distance learning for the remainder of the year. I personally do not think returning to full on-campus learning is a reasonable decision to make for the whole school.
I agree with you, Heather, and I think that there are so many unknowns that are still coming at us. It seems, while I admire anybody who feels like they have a plan and can go forth with it, it seems like we need to support decisions that the administrator may be forced to make based on additional information. We still, there's no definite outcome day to day.
Laura, Vicky, you had a comment, either or a question you want to make?
It seems like if we're having a surge right now in those numbers, if the numbers doubled in the past week, then I can't imagine what it's going to be like after the holidays when all the shopping's done and all the visiting's done. I think the risk is really great for everyone because, you know, the kids' exposure, teachers' exposure, that exposes their family. That exposure is their family's exposure too. So it's hard to say it, but I think we should not make any decisions until January. I don't know that any of us are traveling for the holidays, but I am available for meeting anytime if we do need to make decisions. And I think we should stay flexible and open on it and be very protective. Thank you.
Sure. I see Chelsea's got her hand up, Laura's got her hand up, then Susan, and we have a whole sub conversation going on in the chat. And I'm just gonna, because some people are asking questions in the chat before I have Chelsea take her turn. Chico Unified was open just until Thursday. I think that someone said the high school was closed on Friday. So it was just Wednesday, Thursday. So we've only been talking about 2 days. Also in the chat, interesting idea. I see more hands up. As an interesting idea of possibly letting people who wanted to do distance learning just for this week, do distance learning that would minimize the amount of students on campus. That was in the chat. Let's go back to our hands that are raised. I'm just gonna say Chelsea first, then Laura, then Susan, then Trisha.
The first point that I'd like to make, and I actually have two things, one of which is a video that I had requested to be able to show. And I want to show that during this item. I think it's extremely important. It's short. One of the things that I wanted to say is just a reminder that families who do not feel comfortable being on campus and want their students to be in distance learning are still being offered that. So as we're talking about the campus remaining open, we are also still have the opportunity to continue with what we're doing now, which is to continue offering distance learning for the families who are interested in that or need that. Also remembering that some families can't do distance learning with their students and then that's not an option. And also just the mental health component. But I do want to just say again, and I jotted this down, so I'm going to read it so that I can articulate it well. Although as a community, we are in the purple tier and we are seeing surges in cases, we are not seeing the county's trends represented in the county's schools because we are able to uphold more strict protocols and require the adherence to those. That is contributing to that, as well as the lessened transmission rates seen from children. And there's data on that on the CDC's website, but with it being a significantly lower transmission in children, especially children at the ages that we have in our schools. Obviously, as they get older, those transmission potentials are higher. So I just want to be mindful of that. I don't want to completely separate our decision for the school from the county, but I also don't want to tie it so exclusively because we're not seeing the same data, and not just in our school. Like we said, we've had 0 cases since reopening in our school. But also even in the other schools in our district, we are not seeing those same trends. We are seeing far lower transmission. And as of the Chico Unified Board meeting the other night, only 2 were of those cases within the Chico Unified schools were contact traced to actually being on school exposure. So just something to be mindful of. We're not seeing the same data in schools that we're seeing in the general public. And then I did want to show a video. I don't know if I have the option to share the screen.
Yeah, let's go. Can we hear from a few people and then we'll watch the video? Is that okay?
This directly attributes to this conversation. So
yeah, I know. I just people are waiting to say stuff. Like people have had their hands up for a minute, and so I just want to hear if they have a comment. You know what I mean? We're not going to forget about the video because I know it's important. Sure. Tricia, did you want to say something? Am I blocked? Tricia and then Laura.
Okay, sorry. Everybody was frozen for a second.
Okay.
So my comment was I agree with what everybody's saying as far as keeping it to that hybrid option in January and making decisions as we go and we see how the cases are going. As far as the next couple days, I think that's too quick of a decisions for families to have plans. I don't know that. I think we'd have a pretty big backlash if we did that to parents. I would more maybe talk about extending distance learning only for the first week back in January because people are going to be around other people, and maybe extending that to just that first week back being distance learning only to give people that extra quarantine time. I still think that's going to be very challenging for a lot of families that are working and don't have a place for their kids to go because other programs probably aren't going to be offering anything at that period. So that would be my only thought, to just try to help protect families and teachers after the break, because as much as we are all trying to quarantine, I know that we're going to be around extra people during that holiday time. So
yeah, my elderly mother's stance is that she'd rather get a kiss from her granddaughter and die for it than to not have the kiss from her granddaughter. So, and
I think that is probably how the majority of people feel. So especially after the year. So
yeah, exactly. Laura?
I just wanted to say, you know, I feel ambivalent about being open at all right now with the number of cases. And I'm really glad, Chelsea, thank you for kind of that reassurance about cases being low in schools. I think that's comforting. And I absolutely understand the need for certain families to have school available as an option. Again, Chelsea, I appreciate your reminder that parents have a choice to send or not send their students to school. However, the way I understand it is that teachers don't have that privilege right now. And I want to bear that in mind too, because the teachers really matter and their safety really matters. That's just important for me to kind of bring that up and consider that. And as far as January goes, I kind of want to echo what others have been saying. It seems like we can't know until it actually happens. Vicky, I like what you were saying about kind of waiting and being available for a special meeting depending on how this goes. But it seems like the trend is that cases will increase. And in terms of kind of what I would be in favor of for January, I love the idea of, I don't love the idea, it's not a perfect idea, but of delaying opening a week or two just to give those potential cases time to come out of the woodwork if that's what's going to happen. And then also keeping it hybrid, so not going fully back, but keeping kind of what we've been doing going, since it seems like that's working currently in terms of safety. That's all.
Thank you. Do you want to show your video now, Chelsea or Susan? Or do you have done their comment before we watch the video that Chelsea's bringing?
I would rather have the board finish their discussion before.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. Yeah. So let's watch the video now.
All right, let me make sure that I can pull this up with audio. There it is, share computer sound. Okay, why is that? Oh. Hold on. It gave me a prompt. Give me. Okay, so it looks like this is going to work. We shall see if I have audio. Okay, let me know if you can't hear this.
Who wanted to speak under items from the floor, but had erroneously submitted their speaker card for 9.1, I believe. So if the will of the board, if we could go back to, I do believe this was our error, go back to 6, the items from the floor, and allow this individual to zoom in and make her comments.
There is no objection. Yes, thank you. Could we contact and get that person available?
Yes, that's going to be Miss Demi Trowbridge, who I believe is on our Zoom, and we'll go ahead and, if Demi is ready.
Sheely. I had 2 children currently enrolled in Chico Unified School District. Now I only have 1. My daughter, Grace Jennifer Doney, ended her life 19 days ago on Sunday, November 22nd. Please listen as I share with you a little bit about my girl. Gracie was a 15-year-old sophomore at Chico High. Before the beginning of COVID, last March, Grace was used to being a straight A student. If Grace got a B, it wasn't good enough for her because she felt that she could do better. Grace was involved in leadership classes at Chico Junior and went on to be an honors English at Chico High. She loves school. Last March, when school moved to online learning, Grace began to struggle. She expressed that she missed her teachers, her classrooms, her friends, picking out her outfits for school. But she did her best and pressed forward to finish out the school year, receiving grades that were not up to her normal standards. In August was the start of another school year online. Grace was accepting of the circumstances, but very sad. She set out to do her best right from the very start of the school year. I watched Gracie up until 2 a.m., many nights before the first set of progress reports came out. She said that ingenuity took so much time to get through, and she was desperately always trying to catch up and complete more assignments. Grace told me that she felt it was impossible to learn chemistry and math without a classroom and teacher to learn with. One night, Grace expressed to me that she knew she wasn't going to succeed in her chemistry class and asked me if I could help her to switch to another class. I called the school the next day. Grace's school counselor was very kind. She told me that the majority of the students were struggling with the ingenuity and that the counseling office was swamped. She looked into switching Grace's chemistry class and was sorry to report that we missed the deadline to switch classes by a few days. When schools opened up for partial in-school learning, Grace felt relieved, but she was sad that she was placed in the AM schedule and her best friends all had the PM schedule. She still kept trying her best. During the last stretch of school, Grace longed to attend each of her classes for full in-person school days. She talked often of her English class. She shared that being in that classroom brought her so much peace and joy, and she wished that she could be in that classroom every day. Grace told me that she thought that if she could move to the PM schedule, that she would feel less lonely because she'd be in the presence of her close friends. I called Chico High on October 26th to see if we could make that change happen for her. I received an email on October 28th that there was a list of 25 other kids that also needed the PM schedule, and that perhaps that change could be made for Grace in January. Shortly after being denied changing her school schedule, on November 16th, we moved to the purple tier. Grace was extremely sad at the thought of the possibility of returning to complete online learning. On Friday, November 20th, I took my children to Cafe Mondo's for our weekly tradition. Sitting in the car drinking her chai latte before school, Grace said, "Mom, I'm feeling sad and frustrated because I have a D- in math. I'm turning in and getting full credit for all of my in-class assignments, but I'm behind in ingenuity because it's too hard for me and it's bringing my grade all the way down to a D-. I assured Grace that as long as she was trying her best, that it was okay, and suggested that she talk to her teacher. Her teacher recommended that she plug away at completing and submitting the missing ingenuity assignments over Thanksgiving break. On that Friday evening, Grace went to her dad's house. On Saturday afternoon, she called me because she had forgotten her Chromebook charger and needed it to get caught up over the break. On Sunday afternoon, my beautiful, smart, loving daughter was gone. The point of this letter is not to place any blame for my daughter's suicide. When rereading recent letters that Grace wrote to me, she wrote things like, "Mom, I'm so glad you always have my back. I feel I must speak out. I feel that our children are being let down by the school system. Some children are getting by okay with the online learning, but some children need to go to school. I took the steps as a parent to try to help my girl just to be told that she missed a deadline by a few days to switch classes and was just another number of kids needing the PM schedule. We need to listen to these children. We need to be able to bend the rules." On another note, I have my 8th grader telling me that the only thing that feels normal in his life right now with the loss of his sister are his hours spent at school. He wishes that he could return to regular, full in-person school days. He wishes that he could be a part of a sports team or had a practice to go to. I want to ask you, if the high school counseling office is so bombarded with struggling students, then why was there a closed sign placed on their door to the students? Why aren't there more counselors? Why aren't we listening to our students? Why are we still using ingenuity when it's causing struggle for so many? Why can't we do better to take care of the mental health of these children? When determining on how to proceed with the next school semester, I ask all of you to really think about the mental health of our children. Many children need to go to regular school. They need face-to-face instruction from their teachers, and they need to be around their peers. Thank you.
So I share this because obviously there are several parts of that letter that and things that are, oh, sorry, hold on,
Superintendent Staley, this is my first.
Okay. But the main thing that, I think we really need to take away from this and just be mindful of as we're talking about this is the mental health of our students, is serving our students and ensuring that, we spend a lot of time talking about what's convenient for parents and what, lots of different things are discussed, but just keeping at the forefront of all of our discussions that really, we're all in this for the kids in our school. That's why teachers choose to teach. That's why I choose to be on this board. That's why administrators and school staff are part of this, is because of the children in our schools. And so just as we're looking at this, just remembering why we're here and how important it is to so many of our children to be at school and have some sense of normalcy. And I would just urge you that to really be focused on not whether or not we should serve children on our campus, but how we can serve all of the children that need to be on our campus, and how we can do that safely. Absolutely, but how we can get the kids in school that need to be there.
Riley?
I'd like to request that, especially around topics of mental health, that we have trigger warnings before some of these topics get shared. Thank you.
I'd like to second that video really should have had a warning preceding it if it was going to be shown at all in this context.
Yeah, I wasn't aware that suicide was part of the topic. I am personally a double survivor of suicide. And a friend of mine committed suicide last week. So I just would have liked to have known that that was in there. I didn't know that that was what that video was. And I agree, we should consider the kids first. That's paramount. But I would have preferred a trigger warning, please. Laurel?
Ditto, but I'm a little bit troubled. This is so very, very difficult. And the introduction of something that emotional doesn't consider our efforts to make rational decisions. I think we could be listening to something where somebody had lost a child to COVID, or one of our wonderful teachers contracted COVID in the school setting, or their child did, or an elderly family relative. And So as much as that's very, very touching and it's disturbing, and I would say, I think all of us always, we're all here for the children. No one can claim the moral high ground. And I agree with Riley. We need to look closely at students and how they're doing, and we need to listen to those appeals and be flexible. But I just want to remind us that an emotional appeal like that could have come just as easily or just as well from somebody contracting COVID in the school setting, or one of the teachers, or anyway, I just want to throw that out.
I also want to point out, like I said earlier, we do have letters about this agenda item from our parent body that reflect these same values, that the kids need to be in school. And to the parents indicate that it would be, you know, that they need to, it's about scheduling and having support for their kids while they have to work. That's in both of the two of the letters from the parents. I see several hands up. I'm not sure if those hands are still up or if those are new. I see Susan, Riley, Emma Todd, and Chelsea Parker. Susan, do you want to go first?
I do still have business level discussion about opening this week and all that. But with that comment, I wanted to refer it to Emma, and Emma Todd is our school counselor, so she can talk about the work we are doing to support children through this. And the suicide issue is big, the COVID issue is big, and it is a balancing that we are having to do. So Emma, if you could just express the kind of work you're doing for us right now.
Thank you so much, Susan, and thank you to the board for giving me the time to speak. I want to just preface this by saying this is in no way a complete list of everything I'm doing. I'm just kind of a look into what's going on in the counseling world for Blue Oak. It has been very busy. I've had a huge surge in mental health referrals over the last several weeks. And we're seeing a lot of distress from children, both on campus and off. I don't know if there's anything specifically you would like me to address, but I will say that the majority of time I'm with students, which is every moment during the school day. It's providing emotional support, emotional first aid. I'm doing quite a bit of crisis counseling for students who have high anxiety about being on campus, and working on just really breathing through the day and finding safety on campus during the day. And then also social support for students on distance learning. So there's a balance there. I will be giving a wellness presentation in the class tomorrow. And I've done quite a bit of support for teachers in terms of bringing coping skills into the classroom. So for a part-time position, I've been quite busy, and it's really an honor to be at Blue Oak. And I know the teachers are taking this information to heart and are really trying to implement it. But I do want to speak to the fact that I have done quite a number of safety plans over the last week for students in a mental health crisis or close to. And those students were actually students on campus. So just something to consider, that the mental health toll from my perspective is equal on campus and off at this moment, just for different reasons. But I'm happy to answer any questions tonight or in the future, anything I can do to help. So thank you.
Thank you, Emma. That's really, really important. I don't know if hands go down once we call on them or not. So I see Chelsea and Heather have hands up also.
Yeah, Heather can go first.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm lowering my hand now. Okay. I am feeling very strongly that we need to consider dialing back our academic expectations considerably and focusing both our distance learning students, not suspending the academic work that they're doing, but focusing the time that they are engaging with their peers or with their teacher on my mind is blank, but something less stressful than trying to complete a bunch of assignments. I don't feel like that is serving our students, and I don't think that they are going to meet their academic expectations when there's just too much pressure. Anyways, so if they're not going to meet their academic expectations anyways, why are we putting them through it? When we went through this with the campfire, we and I know from an educator's standpoint, oh, but the children are going to be so behind, and there's this concern, but they're going to be behind anyways, whether we ask them to do all of the work or we don't. And I think we might need to think about shifting our educational focus for the remainder of the school year.
Thank you. Well taken, especially because our focus is supposed to be educating the whole child. So social emotional, when that's having a deficit, would be an important one to shore up. Absolutely. Chelsea?
First, I absolutely agree, Heather, and thank you for saying that. And the second, I just wanted to just kind of remind everybody that all of the families in our school are given the option to do distance learning, but not all of the families in our school at this time have the option to be on campus because we have wait lists for our classes. So that's where I think it's really important to be mindful of that. Not everybody has that option right now. So just wanting to.
And is that because of the limit of 16 people per class? Because that's only how big our classrooms are?
And because of the current offering that we discussed and passed was to cap that and to rediscuss it for at each of our meetings. And I bring that up because we're on potential January options. So just as we look into moving forward and what those options are, just, you know, my intention was to bring up the mental health of all students. And that small group of students are kind of the ones that are in that crack, the ones who, you know, their families have determined for them to, the desire for them to be back on campus. And it's not, we don't, as far as I know, have some exorbitant wait list, but there are students that fall in that category. So just.
Students that fall in a category of wanting to be on campus but aren't able to, is that what I'm hearing?
Because they're on the wait list and their particular classes at capacity. And that's as per what we, you know, had previously passed and discussed. I don't want to like pass that as somebody's doing something wrong, but just as we're entertaining future options.
Okay, thank you. Susan?
Sure. I'm feeling like we're getting back into the area that I need to speak to. So I want to say too, Emma's doing some really wonderful work, and the awareness overall of the mental health of students is big, as she said, is big and important on all the teachers and all the staff. We're very focused on that as a whole. I will say, as far as the concern, we are probably the most highly concerned about students that achieve at a high level, that are used to getting A's, because they still want to do that. And it's not necessarily about how many assignments or what work we give them are our expectations. It's very much about their expectations of themselves. So we are working with that issue as well. Their desire to be, you know, to do things that we just can't do right now, none of us. So it is a change in their world that we're really working to try to help them get through in many different ways. BCOE came out today with a series, with a webinar for parents on suicide, and I intend to share that out with staff and also parents as well, so they can be alert to what the indicators of that particular issue are as well. Prior to today, when I send out the email, I'm going to address now the waiting list. We had 13 students on the waiting list. The majority of those are because we made the decision when we started to peak in December, we made a decision not to add any more students to classes, even if there was room, because we were trying to get a handle on the safety issue before that. And we explained that to families. So the majority of them will be able to come back in January, and that was the expectation. We have at count as of this morning, we had 5 who cannot fit into the classrooms. So we are reaching out to those families to talk about how we might be able to get them into the school without them actually being in the classroom and what that might look like. So we are, again, doing that work to get students on campus. We have had very few want to go in the other direction and that want to go back to distance learning from being on site. So the demand program is, even though that's an option, and partly because we've said in the past that if you choose to go to distance learning, that gives us the option to give a space to someone else. And then the family will say, no, really we're stay on distance learning. So that option of the remainder of this week, if I just did it as you may stay home for distance learning for the next 2 days, that would basically be the same as if they had an absence. And so there would be a little consternation with the teachers, I think, but overall an understanding of that to reduce the number of potential exposures. So we can do that, but really they already have that option to a great extent to stay home for the next couple of days. And they are making those choices as is appropriate for their family. So the big decision that I'm really looking at needing is whether or not we close in January for the first week. That is, we stay on distance learning that first week. And then I do agree that we are in no way, shape, or form ready to do any other changes at this point. We may very well be the first week in January. Either the spike will have toned down or it won't have, so we'll have more information. And we'll have gotten through the holidays. So that would be my suggestion. And then Kelly and I, Maki and I are working with the on-site hybrid team to figure out how to get those kids that are in larger classes on campus without expanding any further. We have the one class, Kari Maderas, that is larger, and definitely have made the decision that we're staying with it where it is, but it is too large. We could not have a number of classes of that size because we wouldn't be able to fit them in the building. So, so that's the issue. We're trying to figure out how to make that work for families, for teachers, and everything. But it is a struggle, and that's, the idea of reopening, even if we weren't in the middle of this spike, I would be concerned with, as long as we have to keep the 6-foot distancing. So until they're ready to tell us that we don't need that, having full classes on site is going to be difficult. We would have to rent more space somewhere. So that's what I wanted to share. Thank you.
Okay, so it sounds like, so the agenda item of 3.5.2 is the potential January options. I've heard more than one board member say that their expressed opinion was that we we may choose to stay closed that first week in order to give people sort of a quarantine time to return after the holidays, so that after Christmas and family gathering time, so people have an opportunity to, you know, sort of quarantine before they return to school. A question that came up in the chat, which I think is relevant because of considering parents that may not have the option to not have their kids in school, is has CARD extended any sort of childcare options, or, you know, maybe on site at Blue Oak options? I don't know. I mean, has CARD, I don't even know what CARD's involvement has been through all of this for the last few months. So I think that board members need to have that information so they could weigh this decision according to that also, so that parents might have options.
As long as we are open, CARD is also available. And of course, they have limited spots because of their staffing, but they have, I think, 20 students on site at this time that they're working with. If we close, they will not be available specifically for our students. So it is an after-school program. So if we're not here or don't have an on-site program, CARD is not necessarily available. CARD really runs its world around Chico Unified. So when Chico Unified they had a program, an all-day program. When Chico Unified went back on campus, they canceled that same day. So we actually had families that for a few days had been dependent on CARD and did not have any childcare.
So what do we think? Do we want to propose, does anybody want to make a motion about item 3.2.5.2?
This is Trisha. Do we have any idea if we close that first week, and I'm guessing we don't, how that's going to impact, or do distance learning only? It's going to impact those families that need childcare.
Yeah, we have around 170. If we include the ones on the waiting list, we're up to 190 or so, close to 190 that would want to be on campus that would not be able to be on campus. And, you know, we have families that can afford that and would manage it, but most of the ones that have chosen to be on campus are because it's difficult for them not to be, or because they strongly feel their children need the school environment to be well and progress.
I think we can make two separate motions for those two issues. So I'll make a motion and we can see whether it gets seconded or not. I move that we continue our hybrid learning program when we return to school in January and beginning our spring semester, pending extenuating circumstances that would require us to change that.
I will second that. This is Chelsea.
Okay, so we have a first and a second. Any further discussion?
I'm just wondering if we can't just go ahead and schedule another meeting in the last week of December and discuss it then when we have the data.
I would caution against that, only that if the parents are going to have to make a concession, I would rather give them ample time. I think that having the meeting and then rolling it out to parents is going to be a lot harder for teachers to communicate what's going to happen after winter break than giving them opportunity to share that and even share concerns or whatever now, you know?
Okay.
So I would like to at least give them some structure so they can count on something for a certain duration of time. I don't mind revisiting it. I don't mind having another meeting, but I think that we should give them some clarity for this at least, so that they can
Right.
accommodate that.
Yeah, it has a lot of consequences. So the motion is that we make no changes, right?
Vicki, yes, I believe so. That's what I seconded, but also with no specific reopening date attached to it. So that'll be potentially the next motion.
And I keep hearing reopening, but I'm wondering if it's reopening with distance learning, because when I hear reopening, I'm picturing the school closed. So I want to get clarity on that. Because I think
Did anyone take down my motion that they could read it out loud?
I have Heather made a motion to continue our hybrid learning program when we return to school for the spring semester in January, pending extenuating circumstances that would require us to change that.
Heather, you're muted.
Darn it. My motion does not address the first week of January or any additional closures. This is just to continue our hybrid program through spring semester, unless we need to change that.
Monica, my use of the term reopening just refers to after the winter break, because in essence, the school will be closed for winter break, not because of COVID, just because of winter break. So that was why I used that term. So I apologize if that was confusing.
Yeah, okay, I'm just trying to get, Laurel?
No, Heather's motion included something about extenuating circumstances, which I thought was very wise. And my other comment would be that, and I believe Susan will do this, but just the importance of administration keeping parents apprised that any decision is always going to be the best one that we can make, but circumstances may change that. Okay, thank you.
So I guess I'm concerned. So your motion, Heather, says that we would just continue hybrid learning in the spring after winter break, essentially. It's not whether or not we're going to be distance learning that first week of January or not. Is that correct?
That I prefaced my motion with the thought that we could have a separate motion regarding coming back from spring break, or I'm sorry, coming back from Christmas break. Yes. And I just wanted to address, someone in the chat asked what would be extenuating circumstances. And I mean, that could be any number of things. If we had a massive outbreak at the school, or if the governor said all schools have to shut down, or, I mean, there are a number of things that would probably make it so that we would have a special meeting to make a different decision, essentially. But my motion is to continue our hybrid plan for the spring semester. And then obviously we would meet if there was going to be a change to that.
Okay. So any further discussion about the motion that's on the table that's been first and seconded? Okay, so let's vote about just continuing hybrid programming through the spring. Vicki?
Vicki Wanacott, aye.
Trisha?
Trisha Ateertua, aye.
Laura?
Laura Swanson, aye.
Chelsea?
Chelsea, aye.
Laurel?
Laurel Hillward, aye.
Heather?
Heather Bonilla, aye.
And Monica McDaniel, aye. Okay, so we're all in favor of hybrid programming. What about the first week in January after winter break?
So I have maybe a third option.
Okay.
Instead of just all hybrid or all back to normal. Is maybe to strongly urge families who have traveled to remain hybrid through the first, or to remain distance learning through the first week of school. But that, like, the campus would be open, but students that were absent from in classroom but attended distance learning would not be counted as absent or lose their spot in class. Because then, you know, the families who really needed it could utilize that, but really in our language, potentially strongly urge those who have traveled, or, you know, however we want to word that, to remain on distance learning through that week. I don't know what thoughts are on that. And Susan, I saw you.
So that's what I did before Thanksgiving. And I felt it was really well taken, with many parents made the choice to continue to stay home and do distance learning. And I think they are aware of that option. And we, one of the reasons for allowing that to happen and not taking their spaces away is so that they'll be honest with that protection. And I really do feel like parents have been at Blue Oak have been very responsible, letting us know if there's been an exposure in their family and what they're doing about it. And when we've had to send home kids, for even a minor temperature, they've been very supportive and responsive to that. So I'm just very, very appreciative of the parents and how they are handling this for the safety of their teachers that they love and the children in their classes that they love.
Yeah, this is Trisha. I like that idea. I think that is a good compromise to not put families out there that it's really going to cause extra stress on. And so.
Okay, so we have a motion?
Do we really need a motion for that if we're just going to kind of encourage families to do that?
Yeah, I'm already doing that, and I will, and I appreciate Chelsea's support of that action, and that's been brought up here. What I need a motion on is whether or not we're going to close the school for further days in January. That is, close the on-site program portion of our program for the days in January, not close the school.
Because that's what's on the agenda. So we need to address that, whether we're going to have additional hybrid distance learning days in January when we return. Laurel and then Chelsea?
Susan, could it be done not as a motion, a decision now, but I mean, I think several board members have mentioned, waiting and using the best information we have at a particular time. Could it be done as a warning to parents and a request for their input or something? I don't know that it's the decision I'm ready to make right now.
I feel like if we're not going to have, and that's fine, Laurel, of course, this is up to the board. I feel like if we're going to do that, we really do need to make that decision as, we have 2 days on site and then families are gone. So knowing that they will be making plans and living their other lives, non-school lives for the next couple of weeks. What happens one way or another for that first week in January would, I think, be very much appreciated by the community.
Okay, thank you, Susan.
Mm-hmm.
I think I might have a motion.
Okay.
May I ask a question before
Yes,
you make
please.
a motion, Heather?
Yes.
Susan, would you be comfortable giving us a recommendation, or if you have any thoughts on whether or not you think we should delay in-person reopening?
My gut says we should delay the reopening. I think because, when you look at the spike that we found out about today of over 900 cases, that's the worst we've ever been in Butte County. And we're moving on to a Christmas season where, as I think somebody else said, the grandmas are saying, come give me a kiss. I don't care if I live another year or not. So it's a pretty emotional choice to remain isolated, and those are hard choices to make during a Christmas season. I think that the extra 3 days that they would be off site would give that full 14 days between the actual Christmas day and coming back to school. And I think that's significant. They could see family for Christmas and then come back to their normal lives in Chico after that and have not traveled for that period of time. Not that everybody's going to do that, but then when we also add, hey, if you've traveled, please don't come back to school. We still have the distance learning option. I think we're doing a number of levels of steps, and just an extra level of step to keep the community safe. And our nurse, when she's talked to staff and us about the safety of the community, it really talks about that layered effect. You know, what are the layers that keep the community safe? One of the things we talked about in the front office this week as one of our protections is we are a school everybody has to drive to. So you don't have kids walking to school, meeting each other before they get on campus, hanging out without their masks on, and then showing up to school. There are things like that we just don't have really happening. And so it's not spreading as much for Blue Oak. So we are being extremely safe in what we're doing. And that would just be, I think, another layer that gives that time between Christmas Day celebrations and coming back to school.
And I want to remind everybody that earlier in the meeting, you know, the numbers that came out today, it was like 600 and something, you know, this huge spike over the weekend, that's today. And so I think that thinking it's going to get better before January, yeah, I just don't see that with the holiday. So I would be in favor of doing distance learning for that first week. You know, it's not, I don't think that is too prohibitive. It's not the whole semester, it's just a week. And then adding the layers, like Susan says, of other precautions would be my opinion.
What was the original return date from Christmas break?
The 5th. Well, the 4th is a teacher work day. So the first day on campus would be the 5th. So we're talking about the 5th, 6th, and 7th. And then the 8th, again, Friday, is a distance learning day for all families. So that's what you would be acting on.
Thank you
Chelsea, do you have your
asking
hand
that
up?
question, Laura.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Chelsea, do you have your hand up?
I do, and I had my hand up to make a motion, but before I do that, I just wanted to say I worry that extending distance learning required for that week then puts parents in a position to take time off work. And if they're already taking that time off work and it's already in conjunction with travel, then I feel like for many, they would just stay a few extra days with those family that they cherish so much. So I don't necessarily agree that mitigates the concern nearly as much as putting out there that it is an option, and to really strongly urge people who have been exposed to additional people over the break or have traveled to really make it clear that we'd like them to not only not come to school, but also not continue to just be on holiday for an extra week. So that would be, I guess, that's my motion. Is I would like to make a motion that we reopen the campus as scheduled, with strong urging to families to remain on distance learning if able, or words to that effect as deemed appropriate by the administration.
I have a first. Is there a second?
And I know I feel like we're kind of going over and over this again and again, but before I move forward, just because there's a couple teachers on here, I mean, you guys are in touch with your students and your families, what do you think the response is going to be for those 3 days coming back if we continue distance learning only for that week?
That question is directed to Brianna. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a hardship regardless, but I also feel like we're seeing an incredible spike in cases. We're seeing everything else shut down that's big gatherings of things. I feel like this is a proactive and responsible step for us to take and allows families kind of a holding around, some quarantine time after holidays. And yeah, there may be, I think the what if game is really hard. I'm sure there's families who may stay more with family, but maybe those would be the same families who would send their kids to school anyway because their child care options are challenged. I think it feels safe and kind of draws a clear line of prioritizing prioritizing safety around this, and that we're reflecting on it, and kind of gives a window of time post holidays that we won't be gathering all as a big group, is kind of my thought on it. But I do agree on, I think that decision needs to be made now so families can plan for it, not mid break when people are off on their own and maybe they're not checking their email as often and things like that. But that's my opinion about it.
I'll also second that as another teacher.
I had a comment first.
I'm sorry.
Riley.
Yeah, Riley, was that Riley talking?
Yes, that's me right now.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I didn't see you. So
I am here speaking.
Laurel and then Riley.
Okay.
How about
I apologize. I thought it was a second on the motion, and I'd be more comfortable. I'm comfortable, I appreciate the motion, but I'd be more comfortable if we worded it that we would encourage we would explain the reason for the week to parents and encourage them to use it as a time for their family to quarantine. I think to be at all directive about it is to be out of the realm of what we control. And I wonder how that really would come across to people. So I would say the week, and state the purpose to parents, directs the administrator to state the purpose of it and encourage parents to use that week to quarantine.
So
Riley and then Vicky.
Well, I just wanted to ask clarification from Laurel since she was giving a recommendation for my motion change.
Sure.
I just wanted to check in with you, Laurel, because my motion also included reopening on the normal date. Are you suggesting that we don't reopen? And
No, the date, yes, but
okay,
the way it's put to parents, I was a little uncomfortable with.
Okay, then I would be comfortable adjusting my motion to include the language that Laurel suggested.
Can we hear what Riley has to say?
Yeah, thank you.
I just wanted to speak to, I believe in what Brianna was saying with including those days to go to distance learning. And I think it would be supportive of not only teachers, but also of students, because that will also help us ease our behaviors back to being classroom ready by first being on working from home at a distance, because we also, as teachers, experience what happens after a break with students transitioning. And I think this would be supportive after we've been holding them in our classrooms and at a distance, and then moving into a break where we loosen up again. I think by allowing this time where students can be distance learning while teachers are thoughtfully preparing for the rest of the year, I think that could be really supportive to allow them to have that time to be distance learning and then follow with transitioning back to campus the following week. Thank you.
I think.
So, go ahead, go Vicky.
I think that the program, the procedures, the restrictions and all that we've put together, well, that have been put together concerning the safety of our staff and our students is excellent. And I think that keeping the week following the winter break as distance learning just fully supports that program, that we put the safety and welfare of the community before anything else. You know, that's all. Thank you.
So I'm hearing something different than the motion. The motion was to reopen as planned, but with strong urging for those who may have been exposed to distance learn. And then I wanted to circle back to Riley and then Vicky, but I think I hear you guys saying that you're in favor of distance learning for that first week upon return. Am I correct?
That's correct for me. And that's what I
Okay.
heard Riley and Brianna say too. And
That
is
oh, sorry.
very, you know, important.
I'm sorry to confuse the motion. Yes, that is what I feel would be supportive of making that first week distance learning, still learning from a distance, and then returning the week after.
Yeah, this is Trisha. I would be in support of that as well. The first week, those 3 days doing distance learning, just knowing probably what's going to happen. So, and I understand that there's a lot that goes into that. And I hope that those 3 days, families can try to find some arrangements and not cause too much of a hardship. But if we give them at least, you know, a good amount of notice, so. So I don't know if we call for a vote or.
Yeah, so we need to call the question. There's a motion on the table to return as scheduled in person. So we maybe can vote on that and then try another motion. I mean, I'm not, did Chelsea, did your motion get seconded? I don't recall because there was discussion in between. I'm seeing nods. No, there's no second for Chelsea.
At one point, Laurel said she felt like she could with some modifications, but then we went into additional discussion. So I'm not actually sure if that was her intention or not. So I don't know.
Okay, so I want to call the question and first of all, ask, is there a second for Chelsea's motion? Chelsea's motion is to return to in-person learning as scheduled. Laurel, do you second Chelsea's motion?
Sorry, no, it was, sorry.
That's okay. If you don't second Chelsea's.
No, Monica, my motion included more than that though, Monica, and I think that's really important.
Okay.
Because it wasn't simply to reopen as scheduled. It was to reopen as scheduled with communication to parents surrounding the caution and importance of taking that time to quarantine if needed. And then I know, Laura, I don't know the exact wording, and so I don't want to put it in her mouth, but she had some wording that she suggested that I agreed with. So I would love, Laurel, if you would restate the wording you have, because I would like my motion to be modified to include.
Okay, I'll restate what I wanted added was that parents be apprised of the reason, but actually, I apologize, but I'm not sure that I was in full agreement. So I just would like to wait until there's a new motion. And sorry.
That's fine.
Yeah, I'd like to wait.
So is there a second for Chelsea's motion?
Or a second for yours, so I can hear it restated. I think I may be misunderstanding. My understanding is that first week back, we would begin again as scheduled, but we would do it as distance learning only. Yeah, and that's
not her motion. Her motion is in person with the option to quarantine if you think you might have been exposed. Correct? I mean, I'm simplifying it, Chelsea, but is that more like to the point of what you were making?
Yes.
Okay. So is there a second for Chelsea's motion? Hearing no second, the motion fails. Is there a new motion?
This is Laura.
Go ahead,
Oh,
Laura.
Okay. I would like to make a motion that we reopen the week that we have planned to reopen, but with a fully distanced model for that first week. And then we resume hybrid learning the second week of school after winter break.
Okay, so there's a first, is there a second? Laurel, are you the second?
I second it with a request that the reason be communicated to the parents and students.
Okay. Okay, so with understanding and communication, the motion that's on the table now is to have school begin as planned, but with distance learning for the first week, and then continue on hybrid after that first week with, either way, we're gonna have to communicate to the parents the importance, you know, of why we're doing what we're doing.
And the hybrid part, January 11th.
The hybrid part, thank you for being specific, Tricia. With the hybrid, on-site hybrid resuming on January 11th. Correct, Laura and Laurel? Okay. So is there any further discussion at this point with the motion that's currently on the table? I don't see any hands up in the chat. I love that people are putting stuff in the chat, but I'm having a hard time keeping track of it. So yeah, Susan?
I just wanted to make sure when Martin Luther King's birthday is.
Martin Luther King's birthday is, excuse me, usually like January 15th. I don't know, does somebody have that on their calendar?
January 18th. January 18th.
Okay, thanks. I just wanted to make sure we weren't deciding to open on his birthday. That's fine. Thank you.
Yes. Okay. So I have a first and a second. Is there any further discussion at this point about the current motion that's on the floor? Okay, let's have a vote on that motion then. Vicky?
Vicky Wanacott, aye.
Tricia?
Tricia out there too, aye.
Thank you. Laura?
Laura Swanson, aye.
Chelsea?
Chelsea Parker, nay.
Thank you. Laurel Hill?
Laurel Hill Ward, aye.
Laurel Hill Ward, sorry.
All right.
Did you vote nay or aye?
Aye.
Okay. Heather Bonilla?
Heather Bonilla, aye.
Okay. And Monica McDaniel, aye. Okay, so the motion does pass. It's a hard thing to process. Okay. So resuming in January as planned, and then for distance learning, and then full hybrid begins on January 11th. Okay. Okay, so that takes us into the fun stuff, like faculty reports.
Before we move on from that, Monica, I would just like to ask when we will see a plan for adding additional students on campus in order to serve those on the wait list.
Thank you, because that did come up. That was one of the things in the chat that I was losing sight of.
Yeah, and with that,
Jackie was asking that.
addressed as tonight for January options upon return from winter break. I would just like to know when, at which meeting that will be addressed, and we will be offered options that allow for additional students on campus if needed.
Yeah, so the plan is not to bring this back to the board as an option, but to work on it as an admin, faculty, and staffing issue, because it's really about where we can keep the students safely. So if a class, for example, has 18 students and we know that they can only fit 16 into the class safely, which is where we are right now, where are those two other students going to sit, and who's going to monitor them? And, you know, so discussing things like, you know, what happens if we have two students that are in a different classroom and
I think she's gone.
We lost Susan.
Did we lose Susan?
Can text her.
I think her
Laurel,
computer died.
okay, well, while we have this lull before she comes back, Laura does need to leave, so she wanted to, she just wanted to just depart and say goodbye.
I'm so sorry, everybody. I need to
That's
sign
okay.
off.
Happy holidays.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Have a great
All
holiday.
right, thank you for
You
being here.
too. Bye.
All right.
Bye.
While we're waiting for Susan to come back, Chelsea, were you feeling complete? Do you want me to wait till Susan comes back so you could finish this, what you guys were talking about?
Yes, I would absolutely like to know when we're going to address how we're going to serve all of the children.
Yeah,
whether
that was a good question.
Yes, whether that be, you know, that we be presented with an AM/PM, whether we be presented with, you know, the option to entertain additional students in the classroom, because the spacing that we have implemented is not a requirement, it's a recommendation, and it's one that we did pass. But I know that in order to serve all of the students, Chico Unified, their wording is such that, you know, when able and the most space available, and I mean there's some other things in there, so I would just like to, and I'm not saying that that's the right option, I'm saying that I feel like we need to not stop discussing how to serve all of our students in the right way.
Right. She's connecting, so we can finish that. Welcome back.
That was fun. My puppy, when he was in here, must have pulled the plug out of the wall. I didn't realize that I was quite that low on battery, so I apologize. So definitely that is a plan and has been a plan. The only reason it's been put off at all at this point is because of the surge in December that made it impractical to bring additional, or ill-advised to bring additional students on at this time. So we are and have been planning for that change to happen in January. And I'm working with faculty and with staff as to how to make that practical on campus. They will not be able to all be in everyone who wants to be on campus will not be able to be in the classroom. There's no way to do that. So it's a matter of how to do that as equitably and as practically as possible. And we have some ideas, but yeah, that's where we are.
And I'm going to let Chelsea speak for herself, but I'm wondering if the concern is, you know, for the social emotional well-being, if a student really wants to be on campus and they can't be because we're trying to do things equitably and thoughtfully, you know, I think that it would help if even the student and the family had some idea of when that was going to get addressed. And so I think that's what I hear Chelsea asking. Chelsea, is that what you're asking? Because the cap is 16 students right now. And so, you know, I think that making a commitment to getting people who want to be on campus is going to be a priority. But I'm paraphrasing, Chelsea. Am I accurate?
Yeah, it wasn't needing to have that answer tonight of how we're going to accommodate, but just wondering if we have a date when we can expect to hear a plan that that would. And, you know, Susan, while you were disconnected, a couple of the things that I mentioned were, for example, like Chico Unified. I said that the 6-foot requirement was one that we implemented, but it's a recommendation, not a requirement. Chico Unified has put wording to in their policies that, you know, would allow for slightly closer, things like that. And I'm not saying that is the answer, but be it AM/PM, be it, you know, other options. So I was just asking not to commit to an option, but when we could expect to see a plan that would allow for our students who wish to return to school that are not currently in a class but on the wait list to get back in class, when we could expect to see a plan or begin to discuss a plan of that nature.
I would say the second week in January, for those who are not currently able to fit into the class. And I'm going to share, Chelsea, that I would be uncomfortable with the advice that I've received to go lower than the 6-foot distancing. And with the numbers that are requesting to be on campus right now, to start to significantly reduce the number of hours that students are currently getting, feels like not a direction that I would be recommending, though I will talk to staff about those options.
Yeah, and just to be clear, neither of those were recommendations. They were just, you know, the reality is that there are options, and those, although that technically their options aren't ones that I'm advising or even anything that I think is the best, just to, you know, continue to do the creative thinking and to create a plan. And Heather, I'm sorry, I keep jumping back in because I had started this spiral, but I did that you wanted to talk.
Yeah, Heather.
Thank you. Susan, would it be possible to shuffle some students around and create a couple of combined classes using the faculty that we have on hand, and possibly hiring an additional part-time teacher to split Kari Madera's class in half for the students that want to be on campus?
I think those are the kind of things, and I know, Heather, you always have good ideas, but those are the kind of things to me that really the faculty needs to think about how that's going to work, and addressing the Waldorf looping and all of those sorts of things, and what that means. And we definitely have had discussions about the fact that this you may not be in with the class that you're usually in with, and what would that mean? But I do feel like this is particularly the kind of question that I would want the hybrid reopening team of teachers to take on and discuss as to how we would do it.
I agree. I mean, asking teachers to possibly add to their preparation by teaching multi-grade. I mean, there are a lot of things that the teachers need to have voice in, and it's a tough one though. And I mean, I think Heather's request that people think very flexibly is a good one, but it's a big change.
And I will tell you, and you don't need to hear this maybe, but I will tell you that I'm very impressed with the work that that team has done, and the thoughtfulness and thoroughness of their work. That's part of why I wouldn't want to suggest that I know that answer, because they will do a much better job than I certainly could do here in this meeting.
Thank you.
Well, it does take a village. Any more discussion before we move to faculty reports?
Monica, I love our faculty and I love our faculty reports, but we are going on past 9 o'clock already, and we still have a director's report. And so I'm questioning whether it might be feasible to table the faculty report.
I think they're dying
Not
to
that I
talk
want to
to
miss
us.
out on it, but I just wanted to put that out there as a possibility.
I think they're dying to tell us a story.
Okay.
Don't they want to paint a picture? I'm just kidding. Yeah, that's a good idea.
I'll put it to my co-chair because she prepared it, but I was having the similar thought that we are now clocking past 9 o'clock with agenda items still to go.
Sure.
And I know it's not the same, but I would love for you to provide us with your faculty report electronically so that we can still get at least the highlights, because I do value them. But as I just said, good night to my children and sent them off to bed without actually tucking them in, I too am feeling like it's late.
Yeah, agreed.
I'll move that we table item 4, the faculty grade level report, until our next meeting.
with
Okay.
condolences and appreciation to the teachers.
Do you have general board
Thank
consensus?
you, Riley. Thank you, Brianna, for being here.
Consensus.
Thank you.
Agreed. Thank you for the
Thank you.
idea.
Yeah,
Thank
it
you.
is one of my favorite things to hear, but I get it.
Yeah. Susan? Administration, 5.1 Executive Director's Report.
So my first piece is please do read at least the first page because you will enjoy it and get some positive out of that. We continue to have the teachers share what they are hearing from kids, and we do have fun with the children. Continuing to hire, focusing primarily on new aides, and been really happy with the turnout and the quality of the people that we're seeing. So grateful to that. Marketing, I think that we've already spoken on that already. I do want to put a plug in for the December 20th fundraiser that will be a virtual concert, and so look for that information, and please promote that to all of your family and friends. And then the other items are just the work that we are doing and continuing to do, and unless you have some specific questions and want me to share more, I'm happy to hold off and give you even more information in January.
Let's get more information in January.
I agree with Monica.
Where'd you guys go?
Agreed, and big thanks to the teachers.
Thank you.
Okay, so I've read the rest of the faculty report. So are we skipping the rest of the executive report stuff just from read out from your report here?
Yes.
Okay, so are we moving to adjourn?
I believe so.
All right, anyone opposed to adjournment?
See you January 19th.
Yes, so thank you. We will, happy holidays, everybody, and we will, and happy new year, and we will look forward to seeing everybody on Tuesday, January 19th, 2021.
Thank you.
Thank you.